Hello, good morning, everyone. Good morning to all. Welcome to this Sustainable Places 2020 workshop on smart buildings. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for participating. My name is Alexis David, Project and Policy Officer at the ECTP, the European Construction Technology Platform. I will be animating this workshop. I hope everything works smoothly and we don't have technical issues. We were just checking that. Sorry for the couple of minutes delay. It's a pleasure to welcome you in the name of ECTP first, and also in the name of the project SmartBuilt4EU, which is a European project that has just started in October, just a few weeks ago, which is coordinated by ECTP. And just in a few words, these projects aim at creating a smart building innovation community to facilitate exchanges among this community, also to promote the SRI, the Smart Readiness Indicator, and to identify research and innovation priorities for innovation in terms of smart buildings. But I say no more because this project will be presented later on. And the objective of this workshop this morning is to bring together representatives of EU projects and EU initiatives in order to discuss all together the notion of smart buildings, what is going on in the sector, also to discuss potential synergies and the global context of smart buildings in Europe. We might as well have time to discuss research and development orientations all together, but yeah, synergies will be the key word of the exchanges at the end of this workshop. Just before presenting you this very interesting panel we have today, just want to tell you a word about ECTP, who we are. ECTP is an umbrella association based in Brussels, gathering around 140 members, which are large companies, SMEs, universities, RTOs, and other associations, focusing on the construction sector and the whole supply chain of the built environment. Together, we want to be a leading organization to promote and also to influence the future of the built environment with cooperations with the European Commission, for instance. And all together, we develop new research, development, and innovation strategies to improve, to tackle the challenges that the construction sector is facing nowadays. So, for instance, to improve the competitiveness, to meet societal needs, to face environmental challenges, and so on. The ECTP contains 6 expert committees, so all the members of the ECTP can be part of one or several of those committees, which are active aging and design, so adapting the built environment to the evolving needs of the users and occupants. Energy efficient buildings, digital built environments, so digitalization is of course an aspect that impacts or concerns all the other expert committees. Heritage and regeneration, so how to tackle the renovation, for instance, of historic districts. Infrastructure and mobility, and materials and sustainability. Also, ECTP is participating in European projects such as SmartBuilt4EU, which, as I said, we are now coordinating. The team is composed of those friendly people you see on the bottom of your screen. Alain Zarly, the Secretary General, he will be presenting this project SmartBuilt4EU later on. Myself in the middle, at least a few years ago, and Sylvie Corrado, who is working with us and helping us on all the administrative and budgetary issues. So now the agenda for today, after this introduction, we will be lucky enough to welcome a very nice panel of, as I said, European projects and European initiative representatives. We will start first with Sylvain Robert from IASME, who will present the political context of the European Union, with, for example, the Renovation Wave and the SRI, and presenting as well the research and innovation funding opportunities, for instance, with the Green Deal. Then Elektra Papadaki from DG Grow will present an overview of ongoing and upcoming actions for the digitalization in the construction sector, for instance, with the logbook, BIM, digital permit, and digital platforms. Then, as I said, Alain Zarly, Secretary General of ECTP, will present project SmartBuilt4EU, followed by a presentation by Stine Verbeke from Vito, the Flemish Institute for Technological Research. He will be presenting the SRI, the Smart Readiness Indicator, sorry, which is very much linked to the project SmartBuilt4EU. And then we will have the presentation of 4 European projects, so Interconnect, Tawhidi, Phoenix, and Domos, which are all working also in the context of smart buildings. So we'll have David Rua from the Institute for System and Computer Engineering, Technology and Science in Portugal, Emmanuel Onillon from the Swiss Center for Electronics and Microtechnics, Antonio Scarmeta from the University of Murcia in Spain, and Dominique Gabiou from the University of Applied Science and Arts of Western Switzerland. This will be followed by the presentation of B-Log by Sophie Dolens from R2M Solutions. And we have booked enough time for discussions at the end. I will be moderating your questions together with Régis Decamp from R2M Solutions. So he was welcoming you earlier for the speakers. And we'll then close the workshop. So I guess during the whole session, we will have time to welcome 1 or 2 questions after each presentation, burning questions, let's say. And in the end, you will have, again, the opportunity to raise your questions. There is a dedicated section in this tool we're using today where you can raise your questions. And as I say, Régis will read them and direct them to the proper speaker. So before I give the floor to Sylvain, Régis, do you have any further housekeeping rule you would like to mention?
No, I think it's all good. Thanks for the introduction, Alex.
All right, then I stop here and I give the floor to Sylvain. So Sylvain, I think I will be showing your presentation, right, in order to avoid complications.
Yes, indeed, because I participated to the opening session and I had some technical issues with my laptop. It's a big pleasure to be here today. So I'm Sylvain Robert, project advisor in EASME. Before that, I worked a few years in the European Commission in DG Energy, where I had the opportunity to work on the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive and the Smart Readiness Indicator. And even before that, I was, like you, working in EU projects, and in particular in EU projects on smart buildings. So this is, for me, a very, very big pleasure to participate to this event, because I feel that I'm here with the smart buildings dream team of the EU, with these excellent projects, some of which I, of course, already know about and have heard a lot about, with also Vito presenting the Smart Readiness Indicator. So we have an excellent combination of topics today in this workshop, and this is my regret not to be able to stay during the whole workshop, because I have another event at 10 a.m. and I was warned only a bit late that I would participate also to this one. Voilà. So I'm going to repeat things that you've already heard about, I'm afraid, because I'm going to speak about the Green Deal, about the Renovation Wave. I'm going to very briefly mention the SRI, but I know that Sten Verbeke is going to make a more detailed presentation, and I'm going to refer to the future of the funding programs. But the good point is that this is some information you've already heard, but it's going to be short, so it won't be too boring for you normally. Voilà, so starting with the next slide, please, Alexis. Starting with the Green Deal. So now at this point, you've already heard a lot about this initiative, and I'm sure that my colleague Electra Papadaki will also refer to it afterwards. So right after the Commission took office in 2019, it launched this major initiative. This is a flagship initiative of the Commission that really will frame and have a significant impact on EU action in the coming years. So in a few words, it is a new growth strategy which aims to trigger a green and inclusive transition, with also the need to improve people's well-being and the planet's health. The initiative, as you can see on this slide, has different components, but certainly the most emblematic objective, in particular when it comes to the scope of this workshop, is to reach climate neutrality by 2050 in the EU. Such a high ambition translates into objectives that apply to the relevant economic sectors, and in particular, energy, which is responsible of 75% of EU emissions, industry, for the transition to a circular economy, transport with the shift to smart and sustainable mobility, and also buildings, which you all know are responsible for 40% of EU energy consumption. Next slide, please. So in relation to buildings, one of the Green Deal's initiative that is of particular relevance to this workshop is certainly the Renovation Wave. The aim, in a nutshell, is to at least double renovation rates in the EU. And here we're speaking about deep renovation of buildings, not shallow renovation. One thing is that this initiative is going to build on a very ambitious policy framework that the EU already has, and that comes from the Clean Energy for All Europeans package, and on the related inputs, for instance, the member states' long-term building renovation strategy under the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, or the member states' national energy and climate plans under the Energy Union Governance Regulation. You might have seen that also this policy framework is going as part of this initiative to be further reinforced, and in particular in relation to the Energy Efficiency Directive and the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. The action plan of the Renovation Wave is set out in a strategic communication that was published on 14 October, and it covers a broad range of actions structured into 7 pillars, which include legislative action, in particular, as I mentioned, with the envisioned revision of the EED and the EPBD. Also, with a pillar on funding, also a pillar on increasing the capacity of regional and local actors, a 4th pillar on the promotion of comprehensive and integrated renovation interventions, a 5th one on making the construction ecosystem fit to deliver sustainable renovation, and here there is a clear focus on skills. The 6th pillar of the Renovation Wave is dedicated to addressing energy poverty and the access to healthy housing. And the last one is on the promotion of the decarbonization of heating and cooling. I'm not going to detail all the contents of this initiative here. This is not the purpose. Margot Pinot, my colleague, gave a very good presentation yesterday. And of course, you are very much encouraged to consult the strategic communication and to follow the implementation of the related action plan. Next slide, please. One thing I wish to emphasize in this specific context is that digital and smart buildings are emphasized as part of the Renovation Wave communication. They are highlighted as part of the key principles for building renovation towards 2030 and 2050 in order to tackle the twin challenges of green and digital transitions together and to enable highly efficient and zero-emission buildings. And smart buildings are also highlighted in the areas of intervention of the initiative as a key component of comprehensive and integrated renovation interventions. And in relation to the latter, the Smart Readiness Indicator is referred as an instrument that can promote digitally friendly renovations. Next slide, please. So the Smart Readiness Indicator is, I'm sure, something you've heard about, because at least some of the projects represented in this consortium had to take this initiative into account, even at the stage of proposal preparation. But just to mention that, so I'm not going to detail it, as I mentioned, but just to give the context. So in 2018, the revision of the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive introduced a requirement for the Commission to establish this new instrument, the Smart Readiness Indicator. In essence, the aim is to introduce a rating of the smartness of buildings, a bit the same way as the energy performance certificates allow to rate energy performance of buildings. 3 areas of smartness are considered, which are optimal operation, response to users' needs, and energy flexibility. So an important point with the SRI is that though it is established under the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, it goes beyond energy performance in terms of scope. The SRI has the development of this SRI has been supported by 2 technical studies, and Mr. Verbeeke, of course, will give you further details afterwards. But just to mention that it has represented a tremendous technical work and extensive consultations of all stakeholders. And well, in a nutshell, but again, you will have more details. The methodology is based on an approach where smart readiness is the calculation of smart readiness is based on an assessment of functions and services provided by systems and buildings. And basically, the higher the smartness of individual systems is, and then the higher the scores in smart readiness are. Voilà, so if you wish to have more details in any case after Mr. Verbeeke's presentation, you can go to the Commission's website and you will see that the final report of the second technical study is published and really is exhaustive. It covers all areas. Next slide, please. In terms of policy making, so yes, I wish to stress that this is a voluntary scheme for member states. So the legal framework that has been provided and that is now established is given by 2 legal acts, which are a delegated act and an implementing act. So these acts are of different nature, but it's not so important. What is important is that one of the 2 acts really defines the methodology for calculating the smart readiness indicator. For those who know the EPBD, basically, it's a bit comparable to Annex 1 that frames the calculation of energy performance of buildings. And then the implementing act relates more to the requirements that would apply to implementation of the SRI. But in any case, member states can implement or not the scheme. This is their decision, but if they implement it, of course, they have to comply with the legal framework provided by these 2 legal acts, which have been adopted jointly with the Renovation Wave communication on 14 October. However, they have not yet entered into force, these legal acts, because there is an objection period for the Parliament to object possibly on the acts. Normally it should not happen, of course, but just to mention that really the legal framework will be in place and will have entered into force early 2021. And this is when also the national testing phases for the member states which are volunteer can begin. Next slide, please. So I've briefly addressed policy, the policy context. Now, even more briefly, I'm going to refer to the future of the funding of research and innovation and of other types of actions such as market uptake actions. Currently, we have in H2020 basically 3 types of action: research and innovation actions, and coordinated and support actions. Just to mention that for the building sector, in the future programs from 2021, the coordination and support actions, typically market uptake actions or actions that are directed to capacity building, to policy support, and so on, will be implemented in the LIFE program. And for this, there will be a sub-program created that is about the clean energy transition. And so for those interested in this type of action, this is the program you will have to follow from 2021. And next slide, please. And regarding research and innovation actions and innovation actions, it will stay in the successor of H2020, which is Horizon Europe. And more precisely, you see on this slide that there are 3 pillars, and the one that is the most relevant is probably pillar 2 when you are interested in buildings, smart buildings, renovation, etc. And in particular, cluster 5 of pillar 2 on climate, energy, and mobility, but not only. For instance, our colleagues in DG GROW work a lot on construction, the construction area in the scope of cluster 4. So probably cluster 4 and cluster 5 are the ones you should try to follow. And I also wish to mention that in the scope of Horizon Europe, we, with the Commission, have proposed the establishment of a partnership, a research and innovation partnership called Build for People. Really, the aim is with a very broad scope to bring together the public and the private sector on a common roadmap. Here, I would encourage you to go to the Commission's website when you can find the partnerships proposal to follow this initiative, to get involved. And if you wish to also to get in touch with ECTP, which is very much involved in this initiative. Voilà, this is the end of my presentation. I hope it has been helpful, and I wish now to give back the floor to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvain. Thank you very much. It was very clear. I don't know, Regis, you are following the questions from the audience. So first of all, does any of our speakers today have a question for Sylvain about his presentation? If not, Regis, you might also raise questions from the audience.
Yeah, so, Alexis, so far we have no questions in the chat. So again, I invite everyone to use the question box in your control panel if you want to interact with the panelists. And otherwise, Electra, you have the floor now, and normally you can share your screen. And we can see your screen.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm glad it works. I'm Electra Papadaki. I work in the DG Grow of the European Commission. My colleague Sylvain already gave an introduction, and I thank you. So I'm going to speak a bit about the green and digital transition and how they come together when we speak about digitalization in construction. And I think this is a very good place to bring up this discussion, because indeed you deal with both these matters through smart buildings that we're going to discuss together, but of course also looking into energy orientations. So in European policy, green and digital transition will go hand in hand for the years to come. From one side, we have the European Green Deal that Sylvain presented very well, but we also have the Europe Fit for the Digital Age, which is also a very important orientation. Construction and the built environment are not an exemption to that. They are touched by both these orientations, and in order to achieve sustainability in the built environment, we do need full utilization of digital and advanced technologies. You heard, and you know probably everybody very well about the Renovation Wave, which is the European flagship initiative in the area of construction and the built environment. It was adopted a few years ago, charged with many objectives. Of course, the green transition in buildings, the digital transition, but also the recovery of the ecosystem after the pandemic crisis. It is an initiative in the context of the European Green Deal, but it underlines very well the role that digital technologies can have in the decarbonization of the building stock and the modernization of the industrial ecosystem of construction. There were many references to digital construction in the Renovation Wave, going through BIM, Logbooks, digital permits, platforms, and others. Many of these references are building upon existing initiatives, and they aim at raising the ambition for the years to come. Now going a bit more into the construction ecosystem as an industrial ecosystem. When we're speaking about digitalization of the industrial ecosystem of construction, there are many technologies that come in mind. We have sensors, Internet of Things, 3D printing, 3D scanning, drones, building information modeling, all of them that deal with data acquisition, automation of processes, digitalization of information and analysis, and they disrupt the way we construct, and they disrupt the built environment as it functions. And in return, they promise us optimization of different things, of energy and resource efficiency, safety, amelioration of performance of different types, and many other benefits. The Commission, in regards to this policy objective, works towards two directions. From one side, we have to support the construction ecosystem to use all these technologies, to harness their benefits, experiment, use them. But also on the other side, we also have to modernize the processes, including the administrative processes, so innovation can be awarded and information can be valorized. One very good example of how we can valorize the information available is the digital building logbooks. They are such an example of optimizing the sharing of information. They're also a very good example how the digitalization of the construction sector can contribute to smarter buildings and the other way around. Digital building logbooks act as a single repositories of all building-related data, and they can improve data availability and collaboration across the value chain and the construction stakeholders. As a result, they can contribute to the European data economy, and when data governance issues and data sharing models are in place, we can really imagine a huge contribution of the digital building logbooks to the European industrial and data strategies. Also, they can play a lot of role on making information available about equipment, materials, and products that have been used in every building, their quantity, their recyclability, their performance, many information linked to that, therefore enabling circularity in construction. And this was already validated through the new Circular Economy Action Plan, which mentioned clearly logbooks as a tool that can really contribute in the circularity of buildings and the built environment. The Commission is currently working towards an EU framework for digital building logbooks through a dedicated study. Later in the workshop, the project leader will present you in detail what is the work that has been done through the study to define the digital building logbooks, to analyze and assess existing initiatives, their gaps, and propose actions to the Commission and ways forward. From our side, the Commission side, we are committed to demonstrate and spread the use of logbooks, something that was confirmed also in the Renovation Wave with the exact text that you can see in this slide. So for the years to come, we will have to work on optimizing and facilitating the functioning of different European tools in a compatible and interoperable way. So this is basically the translation of this commitment that you saw in the Renovation Wave. Another area that we have a lot of prior action and was also announced in the Renovation Wave is this of BIM, the Building Information Modeling. In Horizon 2020, there were a lot of projects, and I believe there is a dedicated workshop specifically on that this afternoon, that allowed the industry to experiment and test applications of BIM with energy efficiency, with circular economy, with other technologies as well. But regarding BIM, there is another aspect of basically creating the right conditions for innovation to be appreciated, and to be appreciated by clients, specifically public clients, that they spend more than 30% of the money in construction, and that they own build assets from their very beginning, from the procurement up to the operation and the whole life cycle, unlike other owners that maybe they own a build asset for a shorter time. In the Public Procurement Directive of 2014, it was written that public entities may use digital tools such as building information modeling when they procure for construction. And since then, the Commission and DG GROW more specifically have been working with the Member States and the EU BIM Task Group in order to issue a handbook for the introduction of BIM in public procurement in a unified European way, and give some main orientation, train public procurers on what is BIM and how they can use it, but also give ad hoc support to Member States when needed. So through the structural reform funds, Member states have been supported to implement BIM in their public procurement, depending on their needs. So in the case of a member state that was of very low maturity in digital construction, the support is aimed at setting up a construction strategy, digital construction strategy in a national level, while in other member states that are more advanced, we had the example of setting up a BIM-enabled model of digital building permits. Now, our last project is to set up a methodology for cost-benefit analysis for the use of BIM in individual projects, which will help public procurers really calculate the benefits of using BIM when they procure in a single project, and therefore set up the case for BIM. As announced also in the Renovation Wave, we really aim at having BIM becoming the norm when it comes to procurement for construction, and therefore our objective will be to issue a recommendation specifically on that. There were some other technologies that I mentioned present in the Renovation Wave, such as building permits and platforms. These are part of the research and innovation agenda and Horizon Europe. As Sylvain said, this is the cluster 4 of Horizon Europe, which is currently under negotiation with member states. And we will have more news on that hopefully soon by December 2020. But these topics are dealt with there. Before closing, I want to mention two important dates for the digitalization of construction. One is 17th of November, where we will hold the last stakeholder workshop of the Digital Building Logbook study, which will discuss the action recommendations to the Commission. And the 3rd of December, where we will hold the last meeting dedicated to innovation and digitalization in construction as part of the Construction 2020 strategy. That was basically the strategy that was supporting the construction ecosystem until this year. Thank you very much, and I pass back to the chair.
Thank you, Electra. Thank you very much. Well, thanks to your presentation and also the one of Sylvain, I think we have a clear idea of what's going on, what are the initiatives at European level for digitalization, for smart buildings. So again, well, and thank you also for telling us about the next events that will take place in November and December. So I hope we will all be able to join those events. Once again, I will just open the floor to any question from the speakers. I don't see any question in the chat box, but if the speakers have questions, please don't hesitate to unmute.
Hi, sorry, it's Antonio Scarmenta here from Murcia. Thanks for the presentation. Hi, Alexis. Thanks for the presentation, Electra. I think it's quite nice. One question I have, there's any strategy I would say, or approach in the Commission in order to try to coordinate a little bit, I would say, at the national level, the modelization aspect or the standardization of the interoperability of the models? I mentioned this because, I mean, 2 days ago, I received a call from the ministry here, where they have a working group on ontologies and data models for buildings, sensors in the buildings, this kind of stuff. And I mean, and my point is that I don't know what is the level of alignment, I would say, at the EU level at this in this side, no? Because I mean, my understanding is they were a little bit like not really connected to some of the initiatives, I would say, that are happening at the world level, if you like, neither at the European level. Just to notice.
Yes, thank you, Antonio. Can I take the question, Alexis?
Yes, of course.
Yes, okay. Okay, so I speak under the presence of Alan and many colleagues, but there is a lot of work being done with DigiPlace, which is a collaboration among many stakeholders of construction, from member states to industry to research, to set up a framework for the European platforms for construction. So there they have identified different work streams that deal with topics including included what you mentioned. So if it is to be discussed this further in detail, I think the partners that are present in the panel can give you more information. Now, when it comes to logbook, because there are a lot of issues with data and interoperability and different existing initiatives. As I said, the study that is running now and that Sophia will present you in a later part of this workshop is the first attempt to map what is already in there, what are the gaps, and what the EU should do. So the final outcome of this study will be recommendations to us on what should be our role. And looks like our role will be to give some more directions on what you are saying. So the continuation of the current study might be a need for standardization, might be a need to explore through technical studies, as, like what happened with SRI, what are all these aspects, what should be the data sets, the minimum data sets, or how all of this should function together. So there is more to come on that. But we're aware of these challenges, and it's very relevant what you mentioned.
Yeah. And as far as DigiPlace is concerned, so in terms of interconnection and standardization of recommendations for interconnected platforms at EU level, I would strongly recommend you to participate or to attend the workshop this afternoon. If I am not wrong, Electra, you mentioned it. DigiPlace will be presented this afternoon together with many other interesting BIM projects. If we don't have any further question, I will pass the floor to Alain, who might as well also react on DigiPlace. Alain will be showing the slides for you. I hope you can hear us well.
Yes, please. Yes, hopefully you can hear me. A very good morning to everybody. I'm very pleased to be here, though hopefully the connection will be reasonably okay. I'm sorry to confess that I'm currently under unusual settings due to the fact that I'm on holidays, to be fully honest with you, this week. So
well, thank you for joining us.
No, don't worry. But hopefully everybody will be able to hear me. And this is also the reason why, and I do apologize for that, but I will switch off now my camera because I have a very, very low Wi-Fi connection, so hopefully it will save a little bit of the bandwidth. Sorry for that. Anyway, the most interesting is on the slides. So very good morning to everybody. Very pleased to be here with you and with some good old friends, including Emmanuel. Long time we met, I guess. And I would like to give you a short introduction on this SmartBuilt4EU project that has just started a few weeks ago on the 1st of October, and which is really about smart building. And I'll get back to you, of course, on a little bit more in detail on this. Next slide, please. So this project, roughly speaking, as I mentioned to you, has started on the 1st of this month for 30 months. And is a coordinated and support action, and it groups key players. Next slide, next please. And it groups key players, very active, I would say, in the built environment as a whole, and in particular in smart buildings. So ECTP, Alexi nicely introduced the ECTP at the very beginning. URAC and Vito with their expertise in smart buildings and the SRI. And Vito has been in charge, of course, of piloting the two first studies on the SRI. And Dowell management and R2M solution in terms of community and innovation management capabilities. As indeed, we concentrate our work on establishing a smart building community of actors throughout Europe. In supporting the SRI experimentation is, of course, providing knowledge sharing as well. And at the end of the day, we expect to have some research and innovation roadmap and policy recommendations. And to support us as ECTP, we get the support from some of our key members, including LIST in Luxembourg, Cardiff University in the UK, TNO in the Netherlands, VTT in Finland, and ASM in Poland. Next slide, please. So when we refer to, of course, smart buildings and smartness, what is the context in the construction sector, details of everything, and I would say that in particular Sylvain and Electra have nicely introduced, I would say, the overall landscape. But this is, of course, aligning with the ambitious targets of Europe's climate neutrality by 2050 that has been reinforced, of course, through the European Green Deal and through the Renovation Wave. And the building sector, of course, is one of the key enablers for achieving these low carbon economy goals for 2050. And what we do consider is that to deliver this potential, buildings need to transform from passive isolated elements to smart grid ready buildings, that they should be able to act as active nodes, well integrated, for instance, to the energy grids or to the heating and cooling district systems, and while, of course, answering occupants' needs. So we can see that, well, we really are at the crossing of the green transition and, of course, the digital transition, this famous twin transition Sylvain has referred to in his presentation. And, of course, the 2018 Revised Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, that should be, by the way, revised in near future again, is the centrally used legislation when it comes to reducing the energy consumption of buildings. So what we do consider that moving toward this concept of smart buildings that will be discussed later on, by the way, we expect to move towards a zero emission building stock target by 2050, relying on the smart readiness indicator, relying on the rollout of e-mobility infrastructure as well, and the mobilization of public and private financing for renovation activities to tackle energy poverty, but also to improve the way energy is used in buildings. And what is important is that most of the technology, most of those technical barriers have been or are currently tackled thanks to many collaborative research and innovation in EU-funded projects and national initiatives. And many of the technologies, by the way, are already there. It's more a matter of integrating those technologies among them, having them interoperating in the context of the built environment, and trying to break silos and share data and information. So the target, of course, of SmartBuilt4EU is really to remove the last barriers, slowing down the improvement of the energy performance of buildings. Next slide, please. So, as mentioned to you, our intention, which is clear, is really trying to integrate as much as possible this ecosystem associated to smart buildings, which is for sure complex and fragmented due to the variety and heterogeneity of technologies and stakeholders involved. And the overall value chain can be structured around different levels. There is the sub-building level with the market players related to building components, including ICT equipment, active material and equipment, renewable technologies, and so on and so forth. The building level, with players related to the building design, operation, and occupation, the data management, the optimization of uses, including energy uses. The connective environment level with actors related to the different networks that can interact with the building. And last but not least, the regulatory and financial framework level with actors who can incentivize and promote more sustainable energy systems and behaviors, more inclusiveness in the built environment, and innovation, of course, in the domain. And Electra introduced a little bit this, of course, with respect to those regulatory and financial framework, including, of course, with public procurement. Next one, please. So the project objectives, in a nutshell, mapping and consolidating the smart buildings innovation community in Europe, but also potentially interacting, of course, with actors outside Europe, sharing the knowledge and having a set of supporting activities for this smart building innovation, and that will be in particular through task forces and workshops. We'll be back to that point later on. Contribution to the promotion, experimentation, and rollout of the SRI as a follow-up of the two first studies on the SRI and the upcoming one, which is dedicated to implementing indeed at national level the SRI. And at the end of the day, being able, of course, to keep on feeding the European Commission and the European Union as a whole with research and innovation activities, potential future research and innovation activities, and policy recommendation. Next one, please. And this last one will be, of course, through some kind of strategic research and innovation agenda. So the activities are this one, plus fifth one, which is, of course, about enhancing visibility for the smart building innovation community. And we expect to leverage on the EU-funded project on some key players and key experts through some expert board, through a smart building innovation community where we do expect that all of you will be, of course, happy and keen to participate, and I would say the wider community of all those who are at least interested in what we're going to develop. Next one, please. So I'm just having a quick look at the various activities without getting to the details because time is flying. But the first activity in terms of mapping and consolidating the smart building innovation community is summarized in this slide. It's about, of course, having as comprehensive as possible identification of innovation leaders and potential replicators, and having those ones being active partners in the smart building innovation community. And for that, of course, we target in particular the EU-funded projects and consortia. So all of you who are going to present some very, very interesting projects in the area, and trying to foster interactions at all levels, including the national and the regional level, and not only the European. And we plan to do so, of course, in particular through web portal that will integrate and build on existing web resources. This is, of course, ongoing because the project has just started, as I mentioned to you, 3 weeks ago, but we will rely, of course, on some well-established existing web resources. Next one, please. The second activity is dedicated, well, this one, yes, this is a summary, as I mentioned to you, about this notion of, well, the very active community relying on the publicly funded research and innovation project, the wider community from smart cities and their networks, from industry R&I partnerships, including those ones who are under erection in preparation of the Horizon Europe Framework Program, and some consumer and citizen-led initiatives. And we plan, of course, to rely as well as far as scientific and technical development is concerned on scientific publications and specialized media. Next one. Second activity is next one, please. Yes. Second activity is about knowledge sharing, and we will try to do it through kind of silo breaking workflow for the smart building innovation community, and in particular through setting up task force with physical, shall I say physical between codes, probably it would be more a digital than physical workshop in this current situation. But those task force will work on dedicated topics. I'll be back to that in the next slide, and to produce white papers that will in some way try to consolidate the collective work. So based on all the projects that have been identified and selected, and once again, including yours, we intend to have some white paper consolidating the work which is undertaken in various European and national projects. And these will form, of course, also inputs to the R&I roadmap. So if we refer to these, yes, please, go ahead, Alexis. If you refer to these, if we refer to these task force, we have started to identify, well, we plan to indeed have mainly four task forces. One rather dedicated to the engagement of building users and occupants, Second one, really focusing on the integration of components and systems into smart buildings. The third one, in terms of efficient smart buildings within the smart build environment, and being able, of course, to interact with their surrounding environment. And the task force 4, which will be a little bit more about, all those instruments that aim to, of course, support as well the development of smart building, namely business models, financial models, and education. And what we have tried to do is to identify different topics that will be considered in the various semesters along the duration of SmartBuilt4EU. And these, by the way, our intention is that we can discuss even quickly for the time being, but hopefully being able to keep on the discussion later on during the question and answer session today. Next one, please. So the third activity is going to be is dedicated to all the aspects of the promotion and experimentation of the rollout of the Smart Readiness Indicator. So Sign is going to have a comprehensive presentation after my presentation of this SRI. But the idea is really to define an approach to support the adoption and uptake of the SRI across Europe. Sylvain mentioned that will be on a voluntary basis, but that will be, of course, very well formalized, and hopefully that it will help addressing the lack of clarity in the marketplace about the benefits of smart services and technology. So the SRI is kind of course, a referential that will be used to develop a set of technology solution packages, training materials, and workshop for practical testing at the end of the day. Next one, please. The fourth activity will try to consolidate on all the work coming from the previous activities, and in particular activity 2 and 3, for the development of a research, innovation, and policy roadmap. So based on the expertise from the consortium, from the linked third parties of the ECTP, from members of ECTP, from all stakeholders or experts in the various projects, we will try to identify still a list of gaps and potential improvements, and probably we'll try to have, let's say, an overview, a matrix with 10 or 12 key priorities in terms both of future strategic research and innovation on one side, and policy recommendations for the European Commission and the member states on the other side. Next one, please. So the activity 5 being the one dedicated to dissemination and exploitation, and what we wanted to stress is that we intend to participate to at least 6 key events of the sectors, and you will be informed, by the way, about our participation to these key events, because the idea is that we all go together to these key events, including, for instance, the Smart Buildings Annual Event, for instance, or the Smart City Expo, or the MIPIM in Cannes, and so on and so forth. And also 4 webinars that will be organized in partnership with Build Up and Leonardo Energy. And that will be, of course, the opportunity for us to dive into the details of the various topics addressed by the task force, as quickly introduced to you in the previous slide. Next one, please. So, in a nutshell, and maybe wrapping up, one of the key outcomes for sure of SmartBuilt4EU, and we will very, very quickly start thinking about how we have the smart buildings innovation community up and running during the project, of course, but also beyond the end of the project. We still have a little bit of time, of course. This is in 30 months. And we do invite you to actively contribute to our activities, and in particular to join us in this smart buildings innovation community. All the various instruments, as I mentioned to you, are under erection, but you can already click on this registration page so that we can get information about your interest and your potential commitment in our future activities. Thank you very much for your attention. And well, if there is one or two burning questions, I can of course handle them right now. Thanks again.
Thank you, Alain. Thank you very much. So yes, if there is any question, please don't hesitate. One of the main objectives, yes, of SmartBuilt4EU is to bringing together smart building related projects and stakeholders. So hence this workshop actually to start these synergies with the represented projects, the projects that we have around the table. Do we have any questions from the speakers?
We do have a question, Alexis, from the audience. So we do have a question from Xavier Loncourt from BBRI. I think the question was partially answered in the presentation from Alain already, but I will read it again anyway. So the question is, what link do you see between this project, SmartBuilt4EU, and the SRI test phase that should start in some EU member states in 2021? Is it your intention to contribute to this phase?
Alain, do you want to answer this one?
Yes, very quickly, and probably there could be some additional answer from you, Alexis, or maybe Stein in the introduction of his presentation on the SRI. Yes, the objective, of course, of the project of SmartBuilt4EU itself is first and foremost to have the smart buildings community up and running, of course, and clearly following and getting into the detail of the SRI and its future implementation. So in some way, SmartBuilt4EU, and we have the chance, of course, to have veto and sign on board of our activities with respect to the SRI. So there is one work package dedicated to this one, and the idea is, of course, to be in support from, I would say, both kind of a methodological approach, but also, of course, making awareness and spreading the knowledge and the importance of the SRI. So of course, there will be some specific actions for supporting the implementation at national level that will be undertaken in parallel, but once again, with interaction with SmartBuilt4EU. So the activities are, of course, of a slightly different nature, but of course, fully complementary in this sense.
Thank you very much, Alain. And there is a second question, again from Xavier from BBRI, and again linked to the SRI. So the question is, the first version of the SRI does not contain any recommendation on how to improve the assessed building. The SRI framework is currently only an assessment method of the existing situation of the buildings. Is there any possibility for your project to develop this complementary aspect of the SRI, i.e. recommendations on how to improve the SRI?
Well, yes,
so I will have a very
short
answer, but probably Stein will get into more detail of that, but I will have a very short answer. We will investigate probably for sure these specific aspects related to the SRI, and probably dividing into what is definitely related to the implementation of the SRI right now, and that will be ongoing, I would say, in parallel with SmartBuilt4EU, and what is part of future research and innovation that are required to do it. And in that case, of course, this will be carefully mentioned in the strategic research and innovation agenda that we plan to develop in Work Package 4.
Yeah, exactly. Once again, we have a dedicated workshop and dedicated activities to tackle such issues. Unfortunately, we'll have to move on in order to respect. We're a few minutes late already, but since we're talking about the SRI, it's now time to hear much more about it with the presentation from Stijn Verbrekke from Vito, saying you will be able to precise what's the status of the SRI and what are the next steps. Stijn, can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, I can hear you. Hope you can hear me and see my screen.
Yes, we do.
Thanks for having me. So Stijn Verbeke, working at Vito Energyville and University of Antwerp. And as noticed by some other presenters earlier on, we've been very much involved in the development of this SRI instrument. So in my presentation, I will give a short overview of what we actually did in these technical support studies and the current overview. Well, the context was very well introduced by earlier speakers, so all of you are aware that smart technologies have tremendous benefits, but already jumping to the next slide, the conclusion is that in the broader public, these benefits are not always well known. Also, the building sector can be more of a traditional nature. And hence, in the review of the energy performance of buildings directive in 2018, there was an article noticing the introduction of a common union scheme for rating the smartness of buildings, the Smart Readiness Indicator. So it was already in the EPBD in 2018, but the EPBD at that time did not specify how this SRI method would be calculated. It's just a concept of an indicator. And the intention of what it should do, so raise awareness and motivate consumers and support the uptake of technology innovation. But the real details of this indicator needed to be further developed. What the EPBD did include in its Annex 1A were three main elements that should be considered in the evaluation of the smartness of a building, namely the way in which a building can interact with its inhabitants and its users. So managing the operation without too much involvement of the users, but also providing information on actual performance, etc. Second one is making use of these smart technologies to make your building operate more efficiently. And third one, also very importantly, is to make sure that your building can interact with the grid. As you probably all know, this is a very essential element to enable the inclusion of more renewables into the energy sector and to, for example, allow flexibility of your demand and your production to ensure stability of the grid. So these were the main elements, but to have this further elaborated into a feasible assessment scheme, DG Energy commissioned two consecutive support studies, one running from March 2017 to August 2018. And so actually it was during the execution of this study which explored the benefits of SRI that the EPBD was actually already updated. And then a second technical support study which ended at the end of June 2020. And Vito had the pleasure of coordinating both technical support studies. Of course, they were executed with the consortium, and the second consortium was including White Strategic Efficiency Europe. And so the study further developed the methodology, but also looked into implementation pathways and the impact of this instrument across Europe. In the coming few minutes, I will highlight some of the main elements, but of course, there's much more. And if you want to know more on our website, smartreadinnessindicator.eu, you can find both a summary, which is hopefully quite meaningful and readable. I believe it's 25, 26 pages, but also the full report together with its annexes, a few hundred pages in total. And many of you have probably also been involved, as we had a very active stakeholder community, over 800 stakeholders involved throughout the process of both studies, multiple workshops, public testing on over 100 buildings, etc. So it has been a very intensive collaboration with the broad community, and we hope to continue that also with the SmartBuilt4EU community. So that's for the introduction. Let's have a look at the methodology. The aim overall was to come to an instrument which is fairly easy and fairly cheap and fast to implement. And that's a choice which has to be made, and that has some repercussions of the instrument. So it's a rather the complexity in carrying out the project or devising this instrument was actually in keeping the level of simplicity to a good level, while in essence it's of course a complicated matter. We eventually concluded on developing a multi-criteria assessment framework where we have basically the assessments comes down to looking which smart ready services are there in a building. We look at functionality levels because service can be implemented to different degrees of smartness, and then we'll evaluate various impacts and with impact scores, and all this is then weighted into a multiple score or a single score. I will in next slides give some more details on this, on some of the individual elements. To start with these smart ready services, we came up with a catalog of smart ready services being functions that the building can deliver, but these are formulated in a technology neutral way. For example, we do not ask you to have a room thermostat. We ask you which provision is there to have temperature control in a room, and can you control it room by room, or is it a manual, or is it an automated? But the actual technology or the actual piece of equipment you need for that, that's not defined. So that's this technology neutral services. And these are all structured within 9 domains, as you can see below. Some technical domains: heating, cooling, domestic hot water, controlled ventilation, lighting. You know them from energy performance certifications, for example, but others are included as well. Dynamic building envelope, so the way you can operate your shades and opening windows automatically, for example. Your management of electricity in the building, electric vehicle charging, and then a cross-cutting domain of monitoring and control and providing information across all these domains. To give a bit more detail, we ended up with having 2 catalogs. We have the default method for which is suitable for also more intricate, more complex buildings, such as office buildings and such. But we've also devised a simplified method for residential buildings to further ease the methodology for this specific type of buildings. And so the core of the assessment is for an assessor to go through a building and check the functionality levels implemented. Here you have an example on heat emission control, various functionality levels from a non-smart default without automatic control to a fully automated, also checking presence control, for example. And so the basic assessment procedure is checking which services are relevant and then to what extent are they implemented. And what happens next, and automatically as part of the calculation methodology, is then check the impacts that these services have. So we're not just counting the amount of services present in a building, we try to evaluate the eventual impacts of these technologies. And there are multiple impact categories, and as mentioned before by Sylvain, it's not purely about energy. It's of course an impact category, but the other impact categories we have are maintenance and fault prediction, comfort, convenience, health and well-being, information to occupants, and grid flexibility and storage. And we think all these elements are critically important to be able to call a building a sufficiently smart building. Some more details here on the weighting scheme, but the main element to know is that either you have a single score, but very probably for most users, it's equally important to look at what's underneath. So the methodology also foresees in just reporting on these 3 key themes or reporting down to the level of the individual impact categories. And so this is a recap of the whole assessment process. So you basically start with checking which services are relevant for a building, because some services, for example, domestic hot water, might not be needed in some particular buildings. In that case, we're not going to say punish the building for not having smart domestic hot water control, of course. So that's the first step, already greatly reducing the amount of functions you need to check. Then you indicate functionality levels, and the next steps are semi-automatic calculations in counting the impact scores, applying weightings, checking the maximum score, and calculating a normalized impact score. This is an example of the very first assessment we did, the office building where I used to be in better times instead of being at home right now. And the overall score here is expressed as the impact this building has achieved according to the rating scheme vis-a-vis the total possible impact for this building given the types of services which are present there. Now, this is a hard number to communicate, so other steps in the process have been to checking how can we, for example, translate this into an A, B, or C score, which is more easy to communicate. So during the technical support studies, we tested this approach ourselves, but also had many stakeholders participate in the testing. In total, 112 assessments have been carried out, and that showed the feasibility of the approach, also in terms of efforts and required expertise of the assessors. So for the simplified method for residential building, it comes down to less than 1 hour. For the more complex one, about half a day. So this could, for example, as part of one of the implementation pathways, this could fit to be done together with an energy performance certification as one of the potential implementation scenarios. Next, we also looked into graphical design options, tested it with focus groups, and also tested how we can convey other messages, for example, on interoperability of technical services, which is a very difficult and critical element. And I'm sure we can continue that discussion in the SmartBuilt4EU project, and pretty sure many other research projects are also working on this specific theme. We also did an evaluation of the impacts of the SRI and concluded that there are in the end very important positive effects, and these come from two sides. One, just doing the assessments and creating this awareness, but we think equally important is that through the SRI and this list of services and functionality levels, we can also create a common language to describe different technologies and market them, for example. So this is what we refer to as both this pull effect and a push effect. So, coming to the conclusion, the technical study team concluded that it's a cost-effective instrument, that there is great interest of the market, and that the methodology is simple, actionable, and requires acceptable efforts. And we're very happy to know that a few weeks ago, the Commission seemed to have agreed on these statements and have effectively adopted the core of the proposed methodology in the legal acts right now. So next steps, as introduced before, will be the testing, the voluntary testing at national level. And the last point I want to make, which is also important, I think, especially also to the research community, is that in essence, this needs to be a flexible instrument, because what we call smart right now might not be the same as in 3 or 5 years from now. No new technologies hit the market. So in devising the overall scheme, we've incorporated in the ID. So I'm sure there will be a lot of work and continued work on regularly updating the SRI with new technologies, new services, new functionality levels, and such. Le voilà, I give the floor back to Alexis.
Thank you very much. Thank you for presenting that well, the SRI. Well, my first impression is that you have gathered quite a big community around this these activities. I hope we can manage to combine that with SmartBuilt4EU and to involve all those many stakeholders you had. Regis, I don't see any question in the chat box.
Question, yeah, Alexi, if we have time for that, just one.
Just one question, yes.
All right. So it's a question for you, Stijn, or perhaps as well for Electra. So question maybe for the European Commission. The SRI Implementing Act mentions that the Commission shall make available by 1st April 2021 on its website a framework that allows building owners to evaluate the SRI of their building. Do you have any information about this development?
So Electra, if you have an answer, do you want to open your microphone?
Yes, unfortunately, I cannot answer this. So Sylvain is leaving. It's not a work stream I'm working on. So apologies.
No worries. And indeed, yes, Sylvain has left. He had warned us that he had another meeting. So Xavier will. We are monitoring all questions, of course, and so we'll be back to you about this question after the session. We do have your email. We will answer after that. Thank you. And Electra, I wanted to ask you as well. You sent a message in the chat. Perhaps you want to send this message to all audience, because at the moment, yeah, all right.
Yes, anyone that wishes is welcome to attend the workshop on the logbook. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. So I guess we will have to move on. The next presentation, I hope you can take the floor. That will be the project Interconnect with David Ruhr from Inestec. David, do you hear us, and are you able to share your screen?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much. So I'm trying to share right now. So just let me know if you're seeing it full screen.
Yes, we see it full screen. It's all perfect. You can go on. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you very much for inviting us, for being present here to talk about a bit of the Interconnect project. We're not so much of a grown project on the area of the buildings, although we do include a lot of the issues related with the buildings and some of the concerns that were already discussed this morning. So my name is David Ruhr. I'm part from Inestec, which is a research institution based in Porto, Portugal, and we are currently the coordinators of the project. So just to move ahead, so we don't lose too much time, we have a bit of time still for some questions. The Interconnect project is a project that comes from two lines within the Commission, so the GNR and the G-Connect, and it deals basically with both these two domains, the domains of ICT, IoT, and the domain of energy. So what we envisage to contribute is for this full-fledged adoption of energy and non-energy services overall. So in domains that concern the demand side, which of course includes the buildings, and also the part of the grid, as you will see. So we tie this together on a full scale from the demand side to the, let's say, interaction with the energy front, with the electric grids. And we need to provide this through an interoperable scheme, because our focus here, as the name suggests, is to try to interconnect the different digital platforms coming from these different domains. So the ultimate purpose is to make sure that we have the necessary tools that we could use, and we as end users, I include everyone here, that use the flexibility of existing buildings to a larger benefit for society and overall within the energy management. We've already seen here today issues such as energy efficiency in buildings, flexibility overall. It's something that we're looking at. So we are looking at the solutions, the standards and the platforms that can be used and brought in together. And we are looking also of ways to creating marketplaces for services that are based on this interoperability background. So we are emerging from the earlier work carried out in several forums regarding the interoperability within buildings with the SAREF-based ontologies and others such as USEF and SIM designations. And the idea is to create this necessary footprint to make sure that we have a marketplace of services for the application widespread from the demand side to the grid. So this means dealing with a lot of areas here. Some of them are quite well known for the participants here, I'm sure. So we're dealing from this front of ontology to interlink that with the digital platforms to make sure that we are able to support IoT-based solutions, blockchain implementations, on the side of the energy negotiation, smart contracts, and so forth, which relies basically on the IoT implementations. As you will see, we have several large-scale pilots where we intend to demonstrate all of this. We also have one particularity for those that are not aware, which is the financing to open calls. So we have a cascading element within the project. We'll get to that. We need to have this integration with cloud-based systems or local systems. So we are, as it was already mentioned in the presentation ago, we are agnostic to the technology in itself. We're more concerned on the way information takes back and forth the path between the systems and to ensure that the final service and the functionality is fulfilled. We have the electric grid, of course, to integrate all of this, and we have all, I would say, transversal to this topic, big data that's being produced everywhere, cybersecurity elements and privacy tied with that, and standardization where we are mainly focused on. So this is the path that we need to go through. So in terms of outputs that the project is set forth in having. So the function is to develop components for residential and non-residential applications. So this is the tie directly with the buildings. As you will see, we have quite extensive set of buildings within our demonstrations where we are intending to test energy, non-energy services. And I'll detail in a while what do we mean by that. So we're focused on creating this domain interoperable IoT reference architecture. So building up all together in a mix of ontology standards and existing architectures all together to make sure that we speak a common language and we remove from the discussion as much as possible the dependency on existing systems and proprietary systems. And of course, we need to be focusing on creating the business cases for that. The bottom line is to create this digital marketplace for interoperability and this toolkit. So one of the main outputs that will be producing within the project is in fact this interoperability toolkit, which means that all of the solutions developed within the project will be available firsthand in the demonstrations that we'll have inside the project. But given that we have this cascading and open call funding available in the project, we will also make those platforms, those tools available to third parties. And also, which is also an important element, to be able to accommodate within this digital marketplace, tools provided or developed within the open calls by other elements. So in smaller projects that are linked with specific themes that will be supported by the project, to make them available in this common digital front store for applications available to everyone. So if you want to pick one specific element from the digital store and build up your own use case, you should be able to do that. You should be able to create and add value to it and then provide back your added value to everyone to use afterwards. The idea is to make sure that from the building front and from the customer and end user of energy, the highest value can be derived from this and remove again the barriers from the lack of interoperability or this, let's say, loopholes of proprietary solutions and developments that are carried out by different manufacturers. We know that there's a role there to play, but there's also this incentive to make sure that by having this openness to the development, they could also benefit from this. And of course, we have the standardization recommendations to the different groups. So we're pretty much as a consortium, we are 51 entities participating. So and we are a very, very large project. So we have participants in the project that are part of this standardization bodies. So we are expected to have and to receive a lot of contributions from these bodies. So again, as mentioned earlier, we're looking at two different domains. So it's ICT domain and energy domain. On the ICT side, we are set to support, and these are some examples of the functionalities and technologies that we're looking at, depending on the application. But basically, we're focused on blockchain implementations, big data support, peer-to-peer mechanisms for service implementation, privacy-preserving functions, and cloud-enabled computing support. This does not mean that we need to focus on this strictly. We can have, let's say, a mix of these ICT tools and technologies provided. It's up then for the legal context and the actual interest in the demonstrations to provide a set of these services. On the energy front, we have different topics also to cover. One of them, sensitive perhaps to this discussion here in the workshop, is the fact of the inclusion of buildings has to deal with different domains. So we're talking about residential and non-residential buildings, and at the end on finding ways of introducing energy management schemes to improve the overall impact and reduce let's say, the impact that the building consumption side has in creating or going towards what we've already seen, let's say the reduction on carbon footprint, hopefully to zero, where we have sustainable buildings. Anyhow, We're also looking at interconnection on the smart grid side and find ways within interoperability to boost the use of flexibility within buildings. So buildings do have a definite role in supporting the grid from the energy front in using the flexibility that it may have there. There's one important point that was also highlighted in the previous presentation, which is the participation of the end users, and that's something that we're also dealing with the definition of specific high-level use cases. So these are the main impacts that we set forth in having in the project. I will just highlight basically this marketplace for services at the EU level. So again, we're looking in ways of developing the energy and non-energy related services and making sure that everything is connected. We're not so much worried if this connection happens at the local stage, if it happens at a remote cloud-based stage, or if it's actually a mix in between. What we are concerned in is making sure that information flows in a way that whoever is the provider of a solution or a technology is able to be replaced by a similar one in a seamless manner. So if you're prepared to have a very good description of what is the system that you have inside of your own building and premises, then you're able to more quickly shift between the provisioning of technology platforms and services provided by, again, service providers. So if you have this marketplace at EU level established where we could publish your contributions and be visible and aware of what's going on, it will be easier to walk through this path of integrating local renewables in the buildings and to ensure once again that we are going forward to a sustainable system. So just to briefly overview what it is that we have in our demonstrations, we are, I would say, enough comprehensive in terms of what we have spread out in Europe as demonstrations go. So we're focused again on using buildings for a specific purpose. I can give you several examples here. So we're based in Portugal and we're focused also on creating the Portuguese pilot that entails the residential and non-residential buildings. And the idea is to create clusters of buildings to support this idea of district management, community management, to make sure that overall we are able to reach a goal. Still not sure, not entirely convinced that we managed to have completely sustainable buildings overall. One of the specific challenge that we're facing in some parts is the use of historic buildings, so buildings that are not so easy to have in terms of integration of renewable systems. And that's something that in a cluster of buildings we are set to achieve overall as main indicators for that cluster. But still, we have several differences overall in our demonstrations, including different types of buildings. So if you see from the Portuguese case, we have sets of supermarkets and domestic buildings being brought together to create these communities. So the idea is to have this geographic widespread through Portugal to account for different areas. The idea is to cover this seaside perspective of the country with different conditions and the interior part from north to the center of the country and to the south of the country, which are exposed to different conditions, and to study what it is the potential for each of these buildings and integrating those with the service platforms that were mentioned earlier. So if we're looking for energy optimization widespread in the different buildings, we should find different ways of testing it in the different countries. Even in the case of the Portuguese demonstration, we have this variability throughout the territory. We are small, but still we have quite a variation on the weather conditions. So this is something to study. We have just to highlight some specific points. For instance, in the Italian case, we are looking for the social housing, and this is a particular challenge in integrating energy efficiency solutions in social housing. So there's plenty of a large challenge there to make sure that we target the end users in a comprehensive way, that we just don't have technology available there for the sake of using, but we do integrate them on the end user perspective to understand what motivates the end users. And there's also, as an example, just to distinguish here, the Belgium case, which has a multi-vector approach in terms of the buildings available there, again, in communities where a wide diversity will be studied there, ranging from, again, domestic buildings to non-residential schools, hospitals, and so forth, which creates yet another quite differentiating vision. So this is the kind of building and service set that we're looking at. It's just an example, it's not comprehensive. So we're looking for residential and houses. So We're looking at independent houses, apartments, single, multiple dwellings, and we're also at common spaces where different services can be supported there. One particular service that it's being explored everywhere with different shades of gray, it's actually electric mobility, because it's a hot theme and there's a lot of it in the different buildings to explore. And also the non-residential, which includes, again, as mentioned, supermarkets, hotel chains, schools, offices, and even a science park. So it's quite comprehensive. We should be able to provide us with enough background and material to study some of these implementations. Again, the part of the ICT and connection related, and the part of energy and the services, which is not a surprise. It's something that we've seen already in the previous presentations, but I would say energy-wise related, we're focused pretty much on the use overall of the flexibility combined with the optimal use of energy within the building. So try to leverage this all together within the cost reduction and the energy use, the actual energy use reduction, and the associated CO2 footprint reduction, not only with the reduction and the efficiency increase in the energy used in buildings, but also with the integration of renewable sources. On the non-energy side, we're focusing on comfort, indoor air quality, health, and well-being as something that needs to be tied together, as we've seen from the part of the classification in buildings, to provide a ranking towards the behavior of the building. It's not just reducing energy, it's not being CO2 friendlier, it's actually to make sure that the part of the non-energy system is also fulfilled. So we are by nature a project that deals with a multi-level and multi-domain perspective. So we are going from the building domain, as you see on the bottom, to the interconnection beyond the building on the service pole at the middle, to the energy system domain on the right side, and in between to deal with the ability to control and provide services within the buildings and integrate the human side. So when we're talking about the end user, we need to clearly distinguish when we're talking about data, and one of our challenges is to make sure that the data flows within all of these topics within the different domains. But when we are talking about filtering and having data treated and available between machines, we also need to be aware that part of this data needs to be also treated and worked when presenting to the humans. So this is just a comprehensive distribution of what we're looking at. The idea at the end is that we create a sort of a common bus for data exchange, and take this bus as a loose term to ensure that whichever is the information that we exchange, we are basing it on a common set of ontologies that allows, again, whichever is the service provider, ranging, for instance, from electric mobility service to a full-blown flexibility management on a non-residential building, which HVAC systems and other systems available, that all in all, whichever is the provider, that's still same set of functionalities are still there, still available to be used within the user of the space in the building and the provider of the service, which can be multiple. If you look even at the domestic, just to give you an example, we're making sure that we are able to create different sets of services, even concerning energy. So you can have your set of flexibility pool within in each of our own households, electric vehicles, thermal loads, and other loads available in your household, and you can deliver or make those appliances and systems to be managed by separate entities. So this is also part of the modularity that we're supporting here. If you want to have your thermal appliances managed as a part of a flexibility scheme from one company, you can have it. If you need to have, or if it's interesting for you to have the management of your electric vehicle for another company as a pool of electric vehicle management to provide added value to you and benefits, it's also possible. So basically, with all of this exchange of data based on ontologies, this should be able to break down the domains and to make sure that the offering in terms of services is more competitive. Just to give you a very quick overview of what we are doing here. So we're creating this interoperability layer in making sure that we support several enablers. So it's all on creating the necessary interfaces to the system. So we are trying to break in on the use of proprietary systems, but we're not, let's say, obligating everyone to leave their legacy or their existing system overall. But they are responsible for creating the necessary interoperability adapters, that's what we call it, to make sure that within this interoperability layer, everyone is able to speak the same language. If later on you want to translate that specifically to the own specific business or industry case for your appliance, that's okay, but you cannot impose your own will. So in that regard, we're focusing based on the SAREF schemes already introduced at the EU scope, and we're developing the new contributions towards SAREF in the case of buildings and the case of domestic goods, which is the partition case, but also to the grid side. So the grid is a bit more challenging because more standards and more regulation, it's a bit more intricate, and challenges also arise from that front. But the idea is, if we manage to secure this interoperability layer, we manage to then shift the responsibility to the providers to make sure that the adapters are provided. And how is this achieved? It's achieved that you have a technology, a template technology adapter for each of the systems that you're bringing together. And keep in mind that we may be talking about an app being provided together, a digital platform from a manufacturer A, which could be on a non-residential building like a warehouse, with an adapter for another digital platform coming from, let's say, a residential building. So the idea is to make sure that all of this data flowing back and forth to create the sets of services are within the playing field of management, ensuring that this interoperability takes place. So this is done via this creation of adapters. One of the points within the project is actually to create this SAREFization of most of the solutions already existing in the market, in order to make sure that even those that are not part of the project but still interested in adopting this interoperability framework are able to do so. So very briefly, just to present you one example of what it's being achieved. In the case is the Portuguese case. So you can see here a lot of the connections incoming from the building. So we have buildings on the bottom part with the domestic households on the left side with the residential demand, and then we have the retail shops integration on the right side. Whichever is then the provider that you see in the middle below the market platforms, we are able to integrate it into a single pool of interoperability layers when talking about different buildings. And we are tying this together with market-related services. On the left side, just as an example, is this necessary interaction that needs to happen when crossing the domain towards the grid. Because if we want to be part of these sustainable buildings, and if we want to make sure that we are able to be fully sufficient in terms of the needs that the building has, we need also to tie hands with the grid operation and not just look at the grid as something that whenever we need is there as an infinite bus. So this is just basically some of the messages that I had to convey here. So I'll pass the floor again to our responsibles, and I'm open to questions. I'm sorry if I surpassed the time.
Okay, yeah, no worries. It is a very big, very comprehensive project, so I guess there are many messages to pass on. Thank you very much. We won't have time for much questions. Just maybe one. You mentioned the cascade funding. Can you maybe re-precise what it funds, which kind of projects, and who can apply for such funding?
It's open to everyone. So we're looking for smaller projects. So projects typically between 9 months to 12 months as execution, where if you have an idea of a service or a digital platform that you want to implement or demonstrate into a specific application in a set of buildings, you're able to do so. So a thematic will be launched for specific types of services, let's say focus on electric mobility, flexibility provisioning to third party, and so forth. This will be available 1 year from today. So it will be published in our website. So feel free to get back at me on this, and to follow also our media links on the project. It's easy to find, H2020 Interconnect, we should get you there. And this will become available in 1 year from today. So there's roughly around 3.8 million euro available in smaller calls between 80,000 euros to 150,000 euros. So quick time to market. Those that need an extra push for the provision of these solutions to the market will find there an opportunity to, within the team, to make their argument, to present the proposal, being ranked, and the project on itself will make the solutions that we develop to them to adopt. They will be available to include their own technology and developments, and to provide other support on the business creation.
Okay, Thank you. Thanks for the precisions. Again, there is clearly an interest to cooperate together with SmartBuilt4EU on that.
Thank you.
If there is no other burning question, I will give the floor to Emmanuel, yes, for Project ICT-based. Emmanuel, the floor is yours. You have around 10 to 15 minutes to present the project.
So I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So thanks. So this morning I have to give an overview of the TABED project that is close to completion. So it's supposed to finish April, first quarter next year. So TABED, taking demand response to scale. So it's the idea of TABED is to develop the necessary hardware and software solution to make buildings demand response ready. So in line a bit with what that was presented before with the smartness indicator. So that could be part of smartness. So I will give a brief overview of what TABED is about, its context, what we propose as technical solution, and the test sites and the next steps. So TABED, so it is still a 3-year project, and it's to allow buildings equipped with energy management systems to integrate energy grid demand response schemes, whatever the communication standards are. In terms of partners, so the project is coordinated by Tractebel in Brussels. So we are happy to have as partner R2M, that is leading the dissemination and the exploitation work package. Cardiff University, that is leading the validation work package. Schneider Electric France and Schneider Electric Italy both are owning test sites. So Schneider Electric France is making available buildings in Grenoble and Schneider Electric Italy in Bergamo. CEA working on analytics, on algorithms, so on building management schemes, and CSCM developing communication bridge, so mostly working on hardware. So the context, so you are all aware of it. So we see in the past years that renewable energy is taking a larger and larger scale. So we can see here on this figure that wind energy, solar energy will play a bigger role in the coming years. So, for instance, here we can see that in Germany, that compared to 2012 and 2020, the importance of solar energy, wind energy, or even biomass energy. And not only renewable energy is playing a bigger role in the energy balance, but also in the economy, its creation of new jobs, also with reduction of greenhouse gas energy. But now we have to develop all the necessary tools so that the buildings can play a bigger role in demand response schemes to allow the introduction of such a large scale of renewable energy. So in line with what I was saying before, so we have an increasing variable role of wind and solar energy. And in order to ease the introduction of this renewable energy, the consumers shall be able to support the grid by valorizing their flexibility and local assets that at commercial buildings levels, but also at residential building level, either whatever the scheme is in terms of demand response scheme. And flexibility can be appliances or storage facilities like batteries. And of course, battery of electrical vehicles will also play a large role in that demand response scheme. So the idea of TABED is to develop all the necessary tools in terms of hardware and software so that any buildings can play a role in demand response in a demand response market. So TABED is developing what we call a building management system extender, so that if a building is equipped with a BMS that is not compatible with demand response, we will extend the BMS to be compatible with demand response scheme. So we have 4 key objectives. So number 1 is to have a system that that the extender can be compatible with any communication protocol. It's a big term, but with a majority of communication protocol, and so that the solution can be deployed either locally on the TABED developed hardware or in the cloud. The second objective 2 is to improve the demand response capability. So yes, the idea is to be able to take control of appliances or storage capabilities, accounting for the end user preferences that will be introduced via a specific graphical user interface. The objective 3 is to, if possible, automatically identify newly appliances that are connected in the building, and to have exchanges via MQTT. And the objective 4 is to validate a solution on 2 residential test sites and on 1 commercial test site. So the architecture, constitutive elements. So a key element is this small black box, so what we call the TABED extender. So that's the hardware. So on this hardware will be able to communicate with two key algorithms. The forecast algorithm, the REEFs, meaning real-time energy and environmental forecasting and simulation, developed by Cardiff, that allows to forecast the need in terms of the flexibility forecast of the building. Then the agent-based optimization that will optimize this flexibility, developed by CEA. The BMS extender will communicate with the grid, so to receive orders in terms of demand response. It will communicate with building stakeholders. So we have developed a dedicated end user interface, and all the necessary drivers in terms of protocols and appliances are stored in a cloud-based database, so that when a new appliance is connected to a BMS extender, all the drivers are fetched in the database. And this BMS extender, if the building is equipped with a building management system, is communicating with the BMS to drive the appliances. So either we can drive directly appliances, or we go via the BMS to pilot key appliance of the building, like the HVAC system or any other appliances, like eventually batteries. So the BMS extender that is now deployed in the building looks like this Star Trek box. It hosts a computer. It's a small computer, Raspberry Pi computer. So it's quite light in terms of computing power. It has several inputs, outputs. Some protocols are communication protocols to communicate with appliances are already implemented in the TABED extender. So we speak about Bluetooth, NOcean, Modbus, KNX. But we can extend these protocols via these USB ports, so that we can add dongles to be able to speak Zigbee, to speak Z-Wave, and so on. And we have several user interfaces like LEDs to be able to give some status and so on. So if we go more into what is implemented in terms of firmware, so inside, so a box will communicate with the devices via what we call SYNC adapter. So in fact, drivers. And inside we speak JSON and MQTT to be able to communicate with the various the key analytics of TABED, namely the prediction algorithms and the optimization algorithms. So these algorithms are run in the cloud, they are not run locally. But in case of a failure, the BMS extender runs a light backup solution that is implemented directly on the Raspberry Pi. We have developed, so here you see a screenshot of a GUI, so that the end user can see what's going on in the building in terms of consumption, in terms of comfort, and so on. So he will be able to see the prediction in terms of building consumption. And he can also enter his preferences for some appliances. For instance, if he has a washing machine, he can enter a period where he wants the washing machine to be part of a demand response scheme. And he will be able to enter new appliances via his graphical user interface. So,
Emmanuel, sorry to interrupt Alexis here. I will just have to invite you to go towards a conclusion if you want to, not to be too late in this workshop. Thank you.
So maybe I will jump directly to the test site. So we are now finalizing the deployment in a large building in Grenoble, where we will play explicit and implicit demand response. Now it's running in a residential building in Bergamo, where we have different use cases. And it's quite interesting that we have a large water tank to play as energy storage, and a residential building in Cardiff. So now the solution is deployed on the test sites, and we are collecting test results that will be analyzed beginning of next year. And we invite you to register for next webinar. So you have here the link for our webinar, and we have already various newsletters. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Thank you very much. I guess anyway, at the end of this workshop, all the presentations will be sent to the audience so that they can have access to the links. Exactly. Thank you very much. I was just wondering, are you working, or will you be working on a commercialization plan, marketing plan for this box?
So at the end of the project, we expect to be at TRL 7. And with R2M, we would like to push the solution to TRL 9. And we have started discussion mostly with Schneider Electric Italy to see the interest of Schneider Electric Italy to have TABD at TRL 9. But we are pushing for that.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Is there any other questions from the speakers or from the audience? Not yet. Okay. I see that it is almost 11 already, so we are about 10 minutes late, but that's fine. Thank you very much, everyone, for your presentation so far. We had planned a 15 minutes break now, but let's shorten it a bit. So let's start again at 11:05. I hope the coffee machine is nearby, so you have enough time to reach a new cup of coffee. Thank you, everyone. We will start so in 6-7 minutes from now with the project Phoenix and Antonio Scarmeta from Murcia University. See you in a few minutes.
Okay, guys.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to this workshop on smart buildings. This was a short stop, but I hope you had time to stretch your legs. So far, just a very quick recap. We had the opportunity to hear about the European context in terms of digitalization of the construction sector, in terms of initiatives concerning smart buildings initiatives. We heard the presentation about the SRI and of 3 European projects so far. We had the Interconnect, TABEDI, and SmartBuilt4EU. We will continue with 2 other very interesting projects still related to smart buildings. We start with Phoenix. Antonio Escarmeta from the University of Murcia in Spain will be presenting. Welcome, Antonio, and the floor is yours.
Okay, many thanks for the presentation and thanks for the invitation to this workshop. I mean, Phoenix, as you will see now, is a project that has just started. I mean, last month basically. So we have not too much to show you about what are our results as in the previous project. But anyway, I mean, I wanted to also a little bit connect the research that we already have been done over the last year with what we want to do in Phoenix, in order also you to have a picture about what is the main objective that we will have in the project and how we are going to face them. I think that there's some connections I think are quite interesting that maybe later we can just discuss with the Interconnect, for example, regarding some of the approach and the technology that we are using. But anyway, I mean, let's give that for the later discussion. So basically, just for you to understand where we come from, basically in our case, we have been working over the several years on different areas linked to the IoT, smart cities, and smart infrastructure in general. We have been working heavily on the digitalization, I would say, of the infrastructure. So how to connect and integrate basically IoT technologies in the context of scenarios like, as I already mentioned, smart cities, smart buildings, and specifically working on the idea of the interoperability aspect and the provision of smart IoT-based platforms in that sense. So we have been working on different initiatives linked to FIWARE, that you know is one of the biggest European initiative on the provision of a data management framework for in this case for different sectors. And we always has been trying in some sense to also take into account different aspects like the idea of for the interoperability based on the creation of different layers that allow us to create some independence over the different processes that are happening, no? Either the data acquisition or the interaction with different systems and services in that sense. So in that sense, that's why we put here. You can see different approaches where different layering with different frameworks that in some sense are proposing this kind of layering approach. Just to mention also that one of the key points, and that's why I put it here, the smart citizens, for example, is that we have also worked heavily on data protection. So in technologies for access control and data minimization on the process of data sharing and data exchange, basically on this kind of infrastructure that I understand is also something quite interesting and important now, more interesting, and is linked to some of the previous presentation, I would say. So one of the latest projects that we were was Entropy, that was basically on how to change the behavior the behavior of the user in relation to the energy efficiencies in the building. Basically, here what we have created is a layer and approach based on a platform based on FIWARE, as I already mentioned, where we were able to collect different kind of input data coming from sensors, from external sources, etc. We create a homogeneous treatment of the data with the semantic enrichment based on a standard like NGSILD that is being pushed now as part of the ETSI in order to create this that common data model, and over them the use of different ontologies, in this case by some SAREF or others, so that at the end we can have a repository with all the information that was integrated from different sources, so to be able to create some kind of analytics, prediction modes, taking into account weather condition, energy consumption, pattern behavior, etc. And based on all of them, being able to generate some kind of recommendation to the user, trying to modify the behavior And for that, we use different kind of tools in that sense. So at the end, they, as you will see later, gaming, virtual reality tools, etc. But at the end, with the objective to see what is the effect basically, and try to get some feedback from the user, and in that way understand how we can improve in general the behavior of the user. At the end, basically the objective is, as you can see here, is to try to understand what happened without intervention and what happened after the intervention, based on the analysis of the behavior and the data that we collect from the devices that are already on the building, and based on this later trying to promote some change, some actions, and based on this trying to understand if this change has been effective or not on the general effective and modification of the energy consumption in that sense. So for that, one important piece, as already said here, was the having a platform that allowed to integrate those information with the common data model, to create some semantic models, or that allow us to aggregate all the information and being able to do some reasoning over it, and then based on this, trying to create some kind of data analytics that can help us in order to make this prediction and decision. No? So basically, at the end, I think that was a quite important piece that allow us also to have some kind of plugin components that we are able to get the data, do some processing, generate new knowledge, and again download that information to the repository, so that it can be continuously evolving what is the knowledge that we have about the behavior of the individual, the behavior of the building, or any kind of prediction of based on existing data in that sense. Okay, and at the end, as I already mentioned, we use application like personal apps or games in order to try to also push this this change on the end user in that sense. So I mean, just to show you that we demonstrate very clear that based on the change of the behavior of the individual, there was a quite relevant improvement on the energy of the saving of the buildings in that sense. Okay, so taking that into account, this is where we come from. I would say where this come now, Phoenix, where we have also a consortium, as you can see here, that cover different areas on Europe and different also climate areas, obviously, in that sense, and where we want a little bit to stress some of the results that we have previously in the other project in order to try to increase the smartness in the existing buildings in that sense. So from one side, to integrate obviously legacy devices that are mostly common in most of the building, but also take into account the capabilities that we have now based on the data integration, on the analytics that we can create based on the different sources that we can get, in order to try to improve make them more active, more intelligent, more smart on the way they interact with the user, but also how they interact between themselves in the whole building, so that we can create an ecosystem that can increase, I would say, the performance and the behavior and all the aspects that are linked to the behavior in the building in that sense. So that's why it's quite important. The mission here is to have a portfolio of ICT solution, that are able to increase the smartness, taking into account, as I already said, not only the energy efficiency, that is obviously is important, but also other of the aspects that already were mentioned for the SRI in that sense, that also include the comfort of the user, also the friendly of the interaction, and the capability to really allow them to change and to improve their connection to the solutions that we can generate in the buildings in that sense. So for doing that, our project has several objectives in that sense. So first of all, one of them is to provide this kind of adapt and play. That is basically what is coming also in the name of in Phoenix. So how to facilitate the mechanism that systems that are not smart can behave a little bit more smart in that sense. So for example, I like also the previous presentation about this solution that they have about integration of the extended VMS, because it's something that also we are working on, some kind of gateway that is able to talk with the legacy in one side, but then standard protocols for the IoT in the other side, and that allows them to integrate a lot of legacy system inside the platform and inside I would say the new solution that we can bring there. Also, as I already said, the idea of create some building smartness hub, in the sense that how to, once we are able to interact in certain way with the different kind of device that we have in the building, how to create some kind of innovative intelligence mechanism that allow to understand and modify certain kind of behavior on the device, but also on the interaction with the user in some sense. And for that, we want to have a hub of components, in that sense, that in some sense will be based on artificial intelligence, in other case will be based on rules, etc. That will be used in order to create a different level of interactions, as I already said, and modification of the behavior of the system, or and in interaction with the end users in that sense. So another important element that we are quite, and this is aligned with what Interconnect was talking about, is this kind of how to support, I would say, some kind of meta models, like I would say, this lingua franca for interoperability. I think it is quite important, and many I would say initiative at European level now are working in that direction. So at the end, if we think about the demand response, they already working on ways to allow the interoperability. If we are talking about the building area, we are talking about also the how different ways to define these interoperability models and so on. And the idea is that at the end we need to look for ways that we can facilitate that at the end we are not imposed certain kind of way of implementing the things, but more about how these need to interface with the rest of the component. And I think it's similar to what interoper was mentioned. They are talking more at the higher level, I would say, in between subsystem. Either in our case, we are interested at the subsystem level, how we can integrate information from different sources, how we can create the common model, and how this model can be interacting with external other entities, like could be the demand response, could be the grid, and so on, so on. So in that sense. And then we want to obviously to develop tools for the people. So one important thing that we learn also from Phoenix is that the user need to be involved, need to be participate there. We cannot assume that things are going to be totally automatic. The individuals, the occupants need to have some kind of interaction, and for them should be something simple, but also that improve their comfort, their way of living, and not something I would say rigid and too technician, I would say in some sense. So for that, we need to ensure obviously the connectivity also, as I already mentioned, doesn't imply a lack of privacy in some sense, but also we don't create a new threats of incidents from the cybersecurity point of view, because now we are managing more and more information. We are open more and more the connection to the external world, and that obviously is creating a new way where this kind of system can be attacked, can be affected by different kind of threats. And in that way, we need to the solution need to take into account that scenario and need to provide privacy and security by design in that sense, and also taking into account for the privacy part, GDPR aspect, etc., so that the user should be in control of what is the information he wants to share and with whom in that sense. And obviously, at the end, important part is also to provide the teaching, no, in the sense to how to allow that the system at the end will work, will have a continuity, and will be able to be used by different kind of stakeholder in that sense. So for that also it's quite important what we understand the concept of the soft landing, in the sense that at the end we need to people understand what it is behind, how it can be used, and we can make it easy to be extensible at the end of the project. That's it. So basically our research line in that sense, for order to do that, as you can see here, are aggregated over different areas. One of them is clearly the IoT gateways for the integration of equipment and human interface interaction, where we need to obviously we already have some experience with previous projects, but now we also will need to do some research on new integration mechanisms, and for that results from previous project, for example, I think are quite interesting. One important element, as I already mentioned, is to create the kind of solution for data analytics that will help us in order to increase, I would say, the capability to predict, to infer basically ways to improve all the solution at the building level, not only at the legacy system, but as I already said, but also between the interaction between the different components that are part of the energy ecosystem that you can have on the building in that sense, and also the connection with the external world. I was in some sense. For that also, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. There's already several European projects generating, I would say, a collection of hubs of AI and learning algorithms that we can try to reuse and adapt them to the specific need of the building sector in that sense. For the trust and security, as already mentioned, we are we have a collection of enablers already as part of the Firewall platform that we will extend as part of this project. In that sense, also the connection on, between the traceability of all the action using the blockchain technologies in general also is one of the key pieces here, and also to manage all the policies that are linked to the user decision on what to share and to whom to share in that sense. And obviously, as I already mentioned, but I mean, we need to engage. We want to have some kind of co-creation with the sectors, with the stakeholders, in order to define new models, new business step in that sense, so that we can identify how to evolve from the existing platform to a new services that we can bring in the future. And finally, as I already said, I think it's quite important, and from our experience in Entropy, is to take into account the how to help the users, the occupants, to also change their behavior in front of the energy and improve the way he can use, not only only to reduce, as I already mentioned. I think reducing is quite important. It's clearly an objective, but also it's important to maintain the comfort and also to maintain the quality of life of the users in the building in that sense. For doing that, okay, we have 5 pilots, as I already mentioned, in different areas and then in Europe. As you can see here, some of them are social housing, other are office buildings, other are for example, in our case, we have a faculty already involved as one of the samples that is going to be as a proof of concept. So, I mean, we need different scenario with different conditions, with different needs, and basically at the end we need to harmonize the solution that can fit to different use case. Similar, I think, to one of the previous projects. I mean, here you can see basically the idea of the architecture of our solution, where, as I already mentioned, we focus mostly on building, I would say, the infrastructure. I would say, where you can see from one side we have the integration. In the lower side, you have the integration of the legacy systems with the different technologies. In some case, there will be intelligence one, if you like, based on existing protocol. In other case, will be totally legacy one that we will to have some kind of gateways, as I already mentioned. We have obviously external data sources, being models, energy market, weather prediction information, etc. All of them need to be adapted, integrated on the common models, as you can see here, so that this model can be later used to different kind of services, for data analytics, for the energy saving, for the automatic creation of model, to evaluate the SRI performance, etc., etc. And over this collection of common building blocks that will be interacting with the different data models, we will generate the different services that will help, in some sense, to the users, in other case to the building owners, in other case to the interaction with the utilities, in this case, in order to work with the demand response or to the grid, etc., etc. In that sense. So as you can see here, the main idea is that there are common interfaces that need to be managed on the different layers, but specifically our important part is to create this common data modeling based on the standard, in this case NGSILD, as I already mentioned, and then over it on different ontologies like SAREF that will help us to have a common layer where the different services that are the green one can operate and do some kind of knowledge generation based on the existing information. For doing that, we have 3 phases.
Antonio, very sorry to interrupt you. I will have to ask you to go towards a conclusion as well.
I'm just finishing. Yes, I'm just saying. I mean, I would just skip that one. That is basically the phase that we are going. And just to summarize, that's what I'm saying, mostly was finishing. So basically, for our project, in that sense, we are quite understand that the end user and the customer need to be in the loop. So that is a key part. So that's why we want to focus on specific tools that also will be applied to the user. The interoperability, as I already mentioned, based in this case, in our case of NGS-ILD for the smart platform, is a key concept. And obviously, as I already mentioned, the use of data analytic, prediction, forecast, etc., in order to manage the different information that we are going to collect from the different sources. And for that, as I already mentioned, important aspect are all the issues regarding how to control and define who can access what data from whom. And for that, we will integrate, as I already mentioned, all these security and privacy enablers that will be part of the architecture that I just mentioned in that sense. And that's all from my side. So.
Thank you, Antonio. Thank you. Sorry for rushing you in the end.
No problem. No problem.
Just a very quick question on my side. You mentioned the development of technologies, let's say making smarter the domestic appliances. I did not understand. Will you develop them within the project, or will you foster innovation and collect those technologies?
I mean, our intention in that sense is one of the partners that we already have. They have some kind of product similar to the one that was presented previously. That is some kind of gateway that connect to the legacy system and then put them on the integration of the IoT world. In that sense, so our intention as part of the project is to reuse that one and see how we can, if it's necessary, any kind of extension in order to integrate them. And obviously, the other issue is that we will check, for example, result of other projects like the one that was presented previously, where maybe we can reuse some of this concept in the context of our project in that sense. So we want to, I mean, we are not going to recreate new solution, but basically to try to reuse existing solution and how to adapt them to the needs of our project in that sense. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Is there any other burning question from the speakers? If not, yes, I will give the floor to Dominique Gabiou to present the project Domos. Dominique, the floor is yours.
Hello, good morning. Well, my name is Dominic, and the project is Domos, but this has nothing to do with one with the other. Domos OS is like operating system, because the vision is to have a kind of intermediate layer between the peripherals, let's say the printer, the mouse, and all the peripheral you may have around the computer, and the application that may make use of these peripheral devices without knowing the details of their form or their implementation. So the idea of the Domos project is basically to make an operating system for buildings. So this is a project that is just starting, that will last over the 3 next years. And it's a project where we have relatively few universities, just 2 out of 11 partners. So this means that we focus on high TRL and on demonstration. Okay, maybe we have seen that today, and I just want to remind it shortly here. There are on the market plenty of services, of smart services for building available. I listed some of them here, and if you look at them, there are basically independent silo solutions, and this leads to several problems. The main observations, the main problems that we have, first one is the lack of integration. So we have multiple gateways, sensors, procedure for access control, web page, and so on. We don't have any single point of access to all of these services, which would be nice for the building occupants. And the second problem is that the development of a cross-product or cross-service solution is difficult or highly complex. And what we see is we have also seen that several times this morning that we need a kind of choreography between several components. Let's say the photovoltaic inverter, the grid, the battery, the heat pump, the blinds, the lighting. All this is interrelated, and it would be desirable to have a way to integrate all these components in an information system, in control and monitoring system. So one of the key topics here is interoperability, as we see. And to reach interoperability is complex because there are many stakeholders with not always compatible interest, and also one of the points is that this domain is open to competition. It's not a regulated domain, so basically every building owner does what he wants, and this is technically not so difficult, but it's from an organization standpoint more difficult because you have to align all stakeholders. And also we have to be careful not to slow down innovation with too restrictive interoperability. And what we see is that people are not happy with the current interoperability situation, and as a result, they make a new standard which makes the scene even more confused. And in the Domos project, we would like to, not to adopt this way. Okay, so here I have represented where we want to be. We want to be kind of mediation layer between, let's say, services and what is named smart ready technologies in the SRI language. So all devices, sensors, actuators that have some kind of digital interface in the home. For this is our roadmap basically. So I may begin here from the demonstration side. We have 5 of them. I will shortly present them later on. This drives the definition of use cases. A use case is, for example, we want to exploit the flexibility of buildings for grid control purposes. And when out of this demonstrator use case, we derive requirements for the IoT technology, but also we derive concept that should be expressed in some nomenclature, in some ontology. And once we have the technology, the IoT technology and the semantics, we will develop some service prototype that we will demonstrate at some demonstration site. And of course, the service prototypes covers the use cases that we have identified in the first phase. So this is basically the workflows that we will have inside Domos. So very much focused on demonstration, what seems to be important for us because we are an innovation action with relatively high TRL level. Okay, so the demonstration site, we have 5 of them. We have one with EDF in Paris, where we will focus on energy efficiency, on prosumer empowerment, prosumer information. We will have a rather big one in Sion, Switzerland, where is our university. there we will have more than 200 buildings connected for several services. I will explain them later on. In Aalborg, we'll work with the utility of the city of Aalborg and in Skive, we will experiment a heat as a service service where building owners pay for heat service and not for kilowatt hour. And in Neuchâtel, by the way, our partner there is CSEM. We will study improved energy efficiency thanks to distribution control of water inside the local in-building water heat distribution system based on circulation of water. Okay, so we'll address basically 5 topics, mostly for residential building. We will address the topic of energy flexibility, either for the integration of building into the electrical grid, or also for peak shaving for district heating, and also for the maximization of self-consumption. We will have control services for energy efficiency. So here the idea is to have a distributed control system to reduce the heat of the water circulating in the distribution heat distribution system. We will do some machine learning on heating system data to find out bad configuration or predictive maintenance. Final goal is to have more energy efficiency, because we saw that many heat pumps, for example, were not optimally configured, and we can detect this situation. Another important point is prosumer empowerment. And also we want to be able to integrate in this environment non-energy services, and we have one that will be one of them will be demonstrated in Paris. So here you see, I don't want to comment individually this, you see our 5 topics and which of them are demonstrated in the different demonstration sites. A few words on IoT technology. We already spoke a lot on this, and maybe just to tell what is our approach. The idea is to provide kind of, let's call it API for application, where application, this is another name for services, by the way, where application or services, they can access information element. Let's say an information element is maybe the temperature in the lounge in a coherent way. The application should be able to also to deal with access control, with authentication in a standard way. And also we would like to implement a privacy control mechanism in coherent way. We would like to have something like what we are used to have with an application on our smartphone. So when we deploy a new service for the house, as a house owner, I may decide if this new application has access to some peripheral informations, to some information element. And if these information elements are present, and if the end user allows it, then the service may use that operation. The idea is not to make a new conversion or translation layer. The idea, and in that respect, we follow the recommendation of the V3C, the World Wide Web Consortium. The idea is to let the different IoT platforms as they are, and just to add in between a description of what is available in this IoT platform, and services would access directly the IoT platform, but would learn how to do it by browsing these descriptions. Okay, IoT and semantics. So we already spoke about this. I guess we don't want to have one more IoT ontology. The idea is to come up from field needs, from field experimentation, and to see how the current ontology, you see some of them here on the right, if they are complete, if they are applicable, and if they are field proof. And this will be mainly our contribution. By the way, the V3C recommendation, they support ontology. So in the descriptions that we will have, we will integrate these ontologies. Okay, so this is the end of my presentation. Thank you for your attention. You see here how you can join our project. But once more content will come, because we are just starting the project right now. So thank you very much, and I give you back the word.
Thank you, Dominic. Thank you very much. Yes, indeed, such as other projects, several are starting, SmartBuilt4EU as well. So I hope we can progress together. I remember one of your sentences. I think you said we need a choreography between the different components and systems that are developed in the project. We've heard of this morning. So that's a good term. And well, I hope at least that SmartBuilt4EU will be able to participate to that by bringing you together to enable this community to join, to exchange information, technologies, and so on. Regis, since you were mentioning it in the chat, maybe you want very briefly to say a word about this this other workshop that is related to one of the points of Dominic.
Yes, good point, Alexi, and thanks for that. Indeed, I put in the chat a message just to inform you that on Friday, just before the closing session, we'll have another workshop which is dealing with ambient assisted living. And I saw that this was mentioned in your presentation, Dominic. You've got one pilot which is going beyond energy efficiency. And so if you are interested in this, feel free to join. Again, it's on Friday morning, and it's chaired by a project called Home for Life, in which ECTP is also involved, by the way, as well as R2M.
Okay, thank you very much. I will forward this information to our relevant partner, and hopefully you will attend this seminar, this webinar.
Excellent. Thanks, Dominic. And Sophie, we can see your slides now correctly. It's okay.
So just before the presentation of Sophie, is there any other question you would like to raise? If not, we will still have time at the end of this workshop. So Sophie, yes, you're going to present the Building Digital Logbook. Well, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks, Alexi. So indeed, I'm going to present this study about the Building Digital Logbook. So it has already been introduced this morning by Electra, but let's now dive into the activities that we have carried out so far. First to present ourselves. So the DLOG consortium is formed by 3 partners: R2M Solutions, Vito, and BPIE. And we have been selected by the European Commission through a call for tenders, and we are running this study. So it's almost the end, and it's a one-year study. So what's the initial motivation for digital building logbooks? So the aim of such logbooks is to increase data availability and transparency to a broad range of market players, to reduce information asymmetries along the building life cycle, and to reduce significantly the need to recreate information over the life cycle of the building. Why is this study for a new framework? So here I have copied just a few of the objectives of the study, but I think that these are the main ones. So the objective of the study is to understand which market needs the logbooks address in the first place, who should have access to information and data of the logbook, what are the impacts of implementing digital building logbooks, how to achieve a fair distribution of benefits created by digital building logbooks, to review the existing national and private systems related to building logbooks, and there are quite a lot actually in Europe, and also out of Europe, by the way, to assess whether there is a need for a European approach for data collection and management, and to propose concrete steps to the Commission to support the logbook approach. And finally, to assess how such initiatives fit into the existing EU policy framework. So this is a list of objectives of the study. And now, how is the study structured? So we have first carried out 2 parallel tasks. So what you can see in green, so we have analyzed the state of play, and we have reviewed national and sectorial initiatives, and I'm going to present this today. In parallel, we have worked on, let's say, elaborating a conceptual definition of digital building logbooks in order to unify let's say, the existing definitions that we have found here and there, and the different functionalities that have been tested in the different initiatives that we have reviewed. So based on these 2 first tasks, we have then carried out a gap analysis in order to identify what the main gaps are and the corresponding actions to fill in these gaps in order to support the widespread use and efficient functioning of digital building logbooks. And finally, thanks to this gap analysis, we have listed a certain number of actions, and together with the European Commission, we have selected a smaller number of priority actions and corresponding action plan and suggestions for synergies with other initiatives, etc. And this is the last task, and we are still working on it, and we will present this very soon, as already introduced by Electra. So here in these red bubbles, you can see the interactions that we have been having with stakeholders. So we have run an online consultation, we have carried out interviews with experts, we have done several events, well, in digital format. And our next event will be on the 17th of November. And it is at this event that we will unveil the recommended Commission actions that we have came to. So what about the review of existing initiatives? So we have analyzed all the initiatives that you can see on this slide. So you can see from numerous countries in Europe, also a few initiatives have been studied from other countries out of Europe. We have also analyzed the results and the approach developed by some EU projects. And based on this review, we have identified some success factors and barriers that have been encountered by the initiative. So regarding the success factors, you can see on this slide the main success factors that we have identified. So for instance, it's important to have the building logbook initiatives based on previous studies, tests, stakeholders' experience, etc. in the country. Something important also is to be able to ensure regular updates of the content of the logbook. It should be also easy to use, user-friendly. There should be a process for data validation, so clear legal framework, a clear scope of the building logbook, alignment with other initiatives and standards, and detailed information about what should be provided by the different stakeholders in the value chain and what should be their role in the logbook. We have also analyzed barriers to implementation, so cost barriers, since of course there's a cost to develop and to implement and to operate logbooks, and it has to be clear. A barrier also in some cases is the static nature of the logbooks that need to be manually updated. For instance, if there is no dynamic information that is connected to the logbook, some issues related to privacy and data management, data ownership, data validation, etc. Access to information. Sometimes information is accessible only on site. So in this case, in fact, the logbooks in question were not digital, but were paper-based, since this is something that exists. The feeling also to have an additional administrative burden by the users in case they do not clearly understand the added value of the logbook, and in some cases, the fragmented regional approach. So, in parallel to this analysis of the existing initiatives, their functionalities, their features, the main success factors, the main barriers encountered, we have also worked on elaborating a definition of digital building logbook. As we have observed that there's a broad spectrum of ideas of what the digital building logbook should be and what it should be able to do. For most interviewees and in most initiatives that we have reviewed, in general, the logbook is a repository for all relevant building data. And the most common purpose mentioned by the interviewees and that we have encountered in the review of existing initiatives is related to the reduction of energy and carbon use and footprint in general, and environmental impact in general throughout the building life cycle. This is a very important concept. The logbook is not only useful for operating the buildings, but it's also something that should be seen with an added value throughout the whole life cycle of the building. Okay, so I'm not going to detail this, and I'm going straight to the definition to which we have that we have elaborated based on the knowledge and the experiences that we have collected. So first, what is a digital building logbook and who is it for? So in our views, a digital building logbook is a common repository for all relevant building data. It facilitates transparency, trust, informed decision-making, and information sharing within the construction sector among building owners and occupants, financial institutions, and public authorities. So it's a very important aspect of the logbook, even though the data that is within the logbook is owned by one particular stakeholder. Still, we believe that the data should be accessible in a way or another way. Well, it could be accessible, for instance, in aggregated manner or anonymized manner, but to several other stakeholders. So what does it do? So the digital building logbook is a dynamic tool that allows a variety of data, information, and documents to be recorded, accessed, enriched, and organized under specific categories. So it's very important to have in mind that the logbooks should be structured in such a way that the user of the logbook can access the information that is he or she is looking for. And it's important also to have this concept of dynamic tool. So of course, the information can be updated. So what's the scope of the digital building logbook? So we consider that it should represent a record of major events and changes over a building's life cycle. For instance, change of ownership, tenure or use, maintenance, refurbishment, or other interventions. So it can include administrative documents, plans, description of the land, the building and its surroundings, technical systems, traceability, and characteristics of construction materials. This is also a very important aspect. Performance data, such as operational energy use, indoor environmental quality, smart building potential, of course, and life cycle emissions, links to ratings and certificates. And as a result, it enables circularity in the built environment. And next, how can the data be stored and managed? So some data in the logbook have a static nature, and some data, as for instance the data coming from smart meters, has a dynamic nature, and they need to be automatically and regularly updated. So it's important to have a connection between the digital building logbook and, for instance, the smart meters or other intelligent devices, and so that this update is automatic and made on a regular basis. So it's important that the logbook is seen as a safe instrument, giving control to users of their data and the access to third parties, of course, respecting the right to protection of personal data. And regarding where the data should be stored, well, in fact, there are different possibilities. Either data can be stored within the logbook, or it can be hosted in a different location to which the logbook acts as a gateway. So this is the definition of the digital building logbook. And now I'm coming to the gap analysis. So what the main gaps we have to address in order to make this definition applicable, and in particular when we compare with the existing initiatives, so what is missing? So the gaps analysis. So I'm going to present it very quickly, just the methodologies that we have undertaken for this gap analysis. So we have compared the functionalities and features of the logbooks that we have analyzed from the different existing initiatives, and we have compared them with the desired data fields and functionalities in an ideal building logbook. We have reviewed the barriers and success factors of existing initiatives that I have already presented. And of course, we have analyzed this based on our own expertise. And this has allowed us to identify the key gaps to be addressed. And finally, based on these gaps and also on the actions suggested by stakeholders through the online survey that we have carried out and through the interviews that we have carried out with more than 30 experts of the field, we have identified and characterized a list of actions addressing the main gaps. So I'm not going to focus today on these actions. I'm just going to present the key gaps that we have identified. So regarding these gaps, we have grouped them into 4 categories. First, about the financial aspect, then gaps in relation with user expectations, in relation with data aspects, and finally, legal aspects. And we have identified 9 main gaps. As you can see, some gaps belong to 2 categories. So if I start with the financial aspect, so the gap number 1 is the lack of a sound funding model. Since the development of the building logbook building blocks, so the features, the data sets, the functionalities can be financed through either, well, public or private means, and some work needs to be carried out in order to identify which parts of the building logbook are best financed by public sector and which parts are best addressed via private initiatives. Second gap, regarding the benefits of the digital building logbook, which are not clear to all the stakeholders. So indeed, even though there are some benefits and we are convinced by these benefits, still in the initiatives that we have reviewed, the tests that have been carried out, it has been observed that in some cases the users were not convinced or did not perceive the benefits of the building logbooks, and therefore they considered it as an additional administrative burden. And so it's an important obstacle, and this needs to be addressed in order to make sure that the benefits, which are really numerous and that concern a lot of different stakeholders, are well understood. Third gap, it's about the inconsistency around the scope and purpose of the building logbook. As at the moment, there are many different interpretations of what a digital building logbook should be, and of course, the study that we are carrying out is a significant step in reaching a common understanding and a common definition that's going to be endorsed at EU level. Next gap, user friendliness. So here it's more about the features and functionalities of the DBL, and user friendliness is key to end users. It has been pointed out by several interviewees. We have seen it mentioned as a key barrier or success factor in the review of existing initiatives. So this is really an important aspect. Then the barriers to updating the digital building logbook. So it can be also related to a lack of user friendliness, also to a lack of understanding of the benefits, but this was also an obstacle that we have observed in the different initiatives that we have reviewed, and that's why it's really important to have this automatic update, if possible, when regarding the dynamic data. So next challenge is linked with the interoperability offered by the repository. So here, so it's, well, the logbook has to be fed from various data sources, and it can also be itself a data source for other protocols, for instance, for certification. So we need also some standards, some processes in order to make sure that all these different data are interoperable.
Sophie, apologies again for interrupting you. If we will need to conclude soon, in order to have some more time for discussions afterwards.
Yes, sorry. Okay, so let me come to the conclusion. So, so issues with data governance, etc. So I'm not going to detail every gap then, and I have just the last slide. So you can see our publication on the European Commission website. So we have published 2 reports. So the first one about the definition of the digital building logbook, and the second one about the state of play. So what I have very briefly presented today. So you can see, you can find these reports online. And the next step is, so the main next step is the elaboration of key recommendations for policy actions. So we have already delivered some draft recommendations to the Commission, and we are going to present these recommendations at a stakeholder meeting. So it will be on the 17th of November in the afternoon. So this stakeholder meeting is open to every interested stakeholder, so you can join us. I have copied here the link for the registration, and I think that Regis also copied it into the chat. So you can click on this link and register at this meeting. And it will be at this meeting that we will present our recommendations, also in relation with research and innovation activities that should be carried out to facilitate the emergence of the logbook concept. And we'll have our third report gathering all project results and these recommendations that should be published hopefully in December at the end of the study. So thank you very much for your attention, and sorry for being a bit long.
No worries. Thank you, Sophie. Thank you very much. On my side, I had one main question, which is what are the dissemination communication actions or even trainings planned in order to increase the understanding and the acceptance of the logbook?
Yeah, actually, our study will be finishing in December with these recommendations that we are delivering to the Commission, and next it will be up to the European Commission to implement these actions. And of course, we will need some communication and dissemination activities if we want to foster and to stimulate the development of logbooks. And one of the recommendations also that we are proposing to the Commission consists in launching some research and innovation actions to support the concept of logbook. And one of these actions could be also a kind of coordination and support action or market uptake action that could also ensure dissemination and communication activities in relation with the logbook. But perhaps this is something Electra would like to comment as well.
I don't know, Electra, if you have any further comment on that. We cannot hear you.
You're muted.
No. I don't know if it is only on my side, but I cannot hear Electra.
No.
So while Electra is trying to adjust, I had an. Okay, yeah, now we can hear you.
Yeah. I'm sorry for that. Yes, as Sophie said, we have received the recommendations from our side. One indeed is highlighting the importance of training the sector in using digital building logbooks. But indeed, the way we see it now, we will need to reach some agreement on the framework on what could be indeed a digital building logbook in the European level, and then see how this can be communicated to member states and also how the sector can be trained. So these actions, we take them into account, but maybe they come in the longer term. And
we have another question from Dominique. who does the logbook belong to?
Sorry, say again.
Yeah, Dominic was asking who the logbook belongs to, who owns it, or I guess would be more manages it.
Yeah, well, actually, the data that will be part of the logbook will always belong to the main user. So, for instance, the data related to the building itself will belong to the building owner. The data related to coming from smart meters belong to building occupants. So there will be a variety of data owners actually, and the logbook itself, well, it's something that is still to be discussed. And the logbook could be provided by public authorities, or could be, well, there are still different options on the table.
Okay. And is there an interaction or common data between, for instance, the logbook and the SRI that could be, I don't know, simultaneously used or stored in the same repository together? That is also a question addressed to Stein, maybe.
Yes, so if I may answer first, of course, the logbook should be linked with the different certifications delivered to the building. So it could be, for instance, the energy performance certificate, but also an SRI certificate that could be part of the data displayed in a logbook, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I want to add that also vice versa. If there's a logbook, this assessment of the SRI can also be much more easy if this information is already available in one single repository.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. All right, well, thank you, Sophie. Thank you all. We have reached the last presentation, so we are slightly late, but let's say that we have a good 15 minutes to discuss all together. One of the main roles initially of this workshop was to bring together some interesting projects and interesting initiatives in terms of smart building, and to start creating this community, this smart building innovation community that we aim to foster within the project SmartBuilt4EU. So I had prepared a few questions, a few points I wanted to discuss with you, but before I do that, I would like to let you express your mind, to maybe comment on what you've heard today. For instance, which synergies do you see between the projects that have been presented? For instance, well, we see many common points between, for instance, Interconnect and Phoenix, and the other projects. So what would you see in terms of synergies, and what would you like to hear about each other's activities? If anybody wants to speak up, Dominic, I think you had a point.
Sorry, it's Antonio Escarmenta here again.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that, I mean, as I already expressed, I was said on my presentation, I think that there's a lot of synergies, at least from some of the projects that we already did the presentation here. Mostly focused on the interoperability issue that I think is quite relevant in the sense how we are able to integrate, I would say, different systems, subsystems in one side, but also at the building level, the different devices that we have ongoing there. From the point of view, not only about the technology only, but also I think from the way that we should provide, I would say, the kind of feedback to the end user. I think that also could be a way that we can try to think about, because at the end it's not just only to provide technologies, it's also to be made to be usable, a technology that can be also integrated easily from the point of view of the occupants or from the constructors and this kind of stuff. No? So for me, this is our two points that at least from our side we will be quite interested on working in collaboration with the other projects.
Mm-hmm. Well, to answer this point, and I don't know if we will have time this morning, but we might get back on you on this topic, because as presented by Anna earlier, we are going to set task forces that want to discuss these hot topics related hot topics to the topics we've been discussing this morning. And there is specifically one of those task forces that will be handling the issues of interoperability, usability of technologies. So I would invite you later today or later in other discussions to maybe join those task forces and to bring your views, bring your inputs for later activities. But more details on that later on.
Yeah,
Dominique, I think you had to leave for other activities. So if you have any point to raise before you leave.
Dominique, we cannot hear you.
No, still not. Regis, I don't know if we can unmute.
If you don't mind, I would have a quick remark.
Yes, I don't know who is speaking. Was it Dominique?
I'm speaking. So I would have
Yes.
a quick remark on, because I have to leave too. A quick remark on what was presented this morning. I find interesting the smart readiness indicators, and I found that all that was presented this morning is really aligned with the developments that are being put in place for that indicator.
Yes, everything
maybe.
is. Yes, now we can hear you, Dominique. Go ahead.
Okay, I don't know. Well, I think we really cannot afford to have not interoperable project talking about interoperability. I mean, we are not serious if we do not reach that result. I mean, how can we justify from EU citizen giving us money to develop a project related to interoperability, and we are not even able to be between ourselves interoperable? So we are at the beginning of a project, and I mean, as a project coordinator, I really push as hard as needed so that we can join forces and not go on our way. I mean, that's for sure.
Well, I think we all share these views, and I hope we'll be able to do that all together in one workshop, one activity or another.
So
and the notion of
I have to go now. I'm sorry. Yeah.
All right.
So
I just wanted to mention very quickly that the notion of interoperability is present in many tables, and the workshop we discussed this afternoon that will be
of course. I mean,
beam technologies and digital platforms will be also talking about interoperability.
And thank you for having done it. And I guess it's very important to make interoperability project interoperable what you are doing. And thank you for it.
Well, thank you for your participation. If you have to leave, well, a warm thank you again for your participation. Now, I would like maybe to share my screen. Regis, I guess you can give me the authorization to do so. Yes, show my screen. To the speakers, I have already shared with you this definition that the project SmartBuilt4EU based itself on one definition of what is a smart building that had been proposed in the frame of the SRI technical study a couple of years ago, and work led by Vito. The notion of smart building can have different definitions because it includes many different aspects. There is this definition in blue in the middle of the screen. One of my questions to you was, do you agree with such a definition? And we have a little poll, Regis, if you can maybe display it, a little poll to ask both you and the audience to agree or disagree with such a definition, if you think that it is deep enough, or if we should add some more elements. I don't see the poll on my screen. Yeah, okay, here it is. So you can vote in the panel, in the control panel on the right side, I suppose. You can vote if it is yes, exhaustive enough or not exhaustive enough. And then we will open the microphones to let you precise what you would like to see appear in such a definition. So I let you a few seconds to vote to this poll.
But sorry, this vote is only for the participant, not for the panelists, no? As far as I see.
That's right. And I think, Alexi, actually, while the poll is online, we are not able to see your slide with the different.
Okay.
So
All
I
right.
think it's better to discuss perhaps that between the speakers and their reaction and feedback.
Then let's discuss directly. Yeah, sorry, I forgot that only the audience could vote on that. I don't know if you still see my screen, but if not, well, you might remember the definition. What were your first thoughts when you read this definition that I sent you a few days ago?
I mean, in my case, I mean, I was checking, and for me, it's quite complete. The only thing maybe that I should maybe I don't know how to add maybe something that is more user-centric also on the way to perceive the smart building, because this I think is more system-centric more than user-centric, I would say in some sense. So we were checking there maybe just to do a small adaptation, not to there's the sentence that you said, efficient manner to changing condition and to adapt to occupant needs and preference with the adaptation of external internal environment, something like that. I would say it could be. I can put it in the chat.
Yes,
so something
sure.
that tune also the idea of how we involve the user. No, I mean, I think it's here. Yeah.
Okay, to involve the users.
Yeah.
Any other comments? So I read efficient manner to changing condition and adapt to occupant needs and preferences with the adaptation of the external and internal environment. Okay. Well, I think that was another point you presented in your project, such introduction, the introduction of those aspects, an important point in Phoenix.
Well, I do agree that's an important point, and it was the same for the technical support studies on the SRI, but it is already in the definition we proposed initially. Right, the last element of this sentence contains building occupants.
No. Yeah.
So the reflection we had when making this definition was really looking in these three themes, namely the occupant, the building itself and its operation, and the grid. Just to add to the discussion, at a given moment, we thought of just defining smartness of a building as a building is smart if the SRI score is high. So I want to put that on the table as well as a more challenging proposition.
Okay. Well, this was a proposition. Does it appear in the report?
I'm not sure. I'm sure I do remember discussing it with some stakeholders just to. I don't think it made it to the final report, but maybe some might comment on it during this session.
Yeah, but the problem there is where you fix the threshold, no, to decide when it's smart or when not. No, I mean you need to.
Well, right, but Stein, I think you mentioned the fact that you wanted to pass from percentages to a grade A, B, C. Well, I guess that would be the threshold, right?
Which one? A, B, C, only E, A and B.
Well, open to further discussions, I'd say.
That's what I'm saying. It's not easy to fix the threshold, depending on the country, depending on the climate zone. So.
Yeah, sure. Well, these aspects are part also of the project SmartBuilt4EU to propose adaptations and to include those parameters, the climatic ones, as you've just mentioned. If we don't have, since the time unfortunately is running very fast, if we don't have further comments on what is a smart building, again, we can have discussions later on this topic. I would like to remind you of the the task forces that I've mentioned before that we will organize within SmartBuilt4EU. So those task forces will gather a certain number of stakeholders, in particular coming from European projects. They will work together in order to come up with common white papers. Yeah, my slide here. The white papers presenting the challenges, key results, lesson learned, and the recommendations for actions on the hot topics identified together with all the stakeholders. And this will be used at a later stage to be part of research, innovation, and policy roadmaps, strategic research and innovation agenda as well, in order to make recommendations and to support the European Commission and member states in getting a better understanding of the state of the art, the state of play of smart building related topics. So as shown before by Alain, we came up with this first suggestion of task forces and subtopics. Each task force has 3 topics, 1 per semester. I'm not going to ask you to give a full overview, of each one of those topics and the clarifications you might need, but when you read those task forces, those topics, did you think that something was missing? Was there a crucial aspect that we should include as well in those task forces? And then my second question, an important one as well, is are you ready to participate in those task forces and to provide your expertise you have gained in your European projects or other activities? So again, the floor is open to anyone who wants to speak up his mind.
So this is David from Inestec. Yes, there are a few topics here that we are definitely interested in. I'm just seeing it for the first time, so I'm still digesting live. I would say the first one, the part related with the engagement of the end users and the data privacy and protection, is definitely something that we are interested on, because one of the issues is our data is flow back and forth and that can be used to leverage services. So that's definitely something. I would say even the IT tools by inheritance is also something that we're keen on. Anything related also with the demand side management or demand response implementation on the user flexibility is also something in our pool. I would say we cover overall every of these aspects here. Since we are a very large project, it's easily to find many contributions in this topic. So what I can do is share internally, and for sure we'll find a lot of interest in this topic. So one of the points missing that since your first question was that one, I don't know if we're having some, because I don't see the whole slide. Unfortunately, it's a bit clipped on the right side. The regulation perspective. So if we're including anything related with that.
Sorry,
regulatory aspect.
Regulatory aspect, okay. But
because it's something that has an implication on the way you may use, for instance, data and how you can introduce the services with the buildings.
But yeah, exactly. One of the outcomes of those task forces will be to discuss the regulatory aspects and to maybe make recommendations on how to adapt them or to make them evolve depending on what we find and what where the discussions bring us. So yeah.
Understood.
Any other reaction? I know it's a large table and it's hard to give a spontaneous reaction on them, but
I mean, I think that two words that I haven't seen then are one if well-being. I mean, at the end, my understanding now, specifically because of the COVID issues. I mean, I think it's something that we need to at least include on some of the grid, if you like. And the other is more on the. I mean, I was set on. Because I mean, actually, what I see that task force 2 and 3 are talking about interoperability issue at different level. I might understand. You know, one is more on the internal operational of the building, and another one is the external operation, if you like. That's just to understand exactly what is the objective in that sense.
So yes, there is the aspect of the users, so inside the building, and the notion of well-being is included, I guess, in the task force 1 and the topic 3. So the smartness, increasing the indoor environment quality. So that includes the notion of well-being, even if it could be mentioned in the topic more clearly. So yes, we have the inside, we have the building itself, the in the task force 3, that will be more the grid, the connection of
the grid and the connection
buildings.
To the okay.
And the last one connected to business models, to the financing aspects.
Alexis?
Yes.
I'm afraid we should really conclude the workshop now, since, as you know, we have another session on digitalization beginning at 1, and they need to start their, I would say, technical rehearsal right now. So,
all right. Well, time is of the essence. I'm very sorry, but indeed we cannot go as deep as we wanted to in this workshop. But well, thank you again all for your participation. These topics that I wanted to discuss during the Q&A session, we can go back on it later on. If you agree, I can contact you and we can maybe initiate further discussions all together. I hope you will be able, you and your colleagues, your partners and your network, to participate in SmartBuilt4EU activities that is in favor of the smart building stakeholders and activities, so in favor also of your activities within your European projects. I will not take more time to conclude, since it's late already. So thank you again, everyone. Warm thank you. We will have other opportunities to cooperate all together. And that's it. I wish you a bon appetit. I hope you're not starving yet. Bon appetit. Enjoy the rest of the day. Enjoy the rest of Sustainable Places 2020, and see you soon.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation for the discussion. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.